Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the June meeting of the Fairfield Board of Finance. Would everybody please rise? I'm going to ask Mr. Becker to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we sit down, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence for all the victims over in London. Last week, terrible tragedy, and our thoughts and prayers go out to them, as well as all the victims of terrorism around the world. Thank you very much. All right, we've got a jam-packed agenda this evening. First up, we have a transfer from the contingency fund related to the special election. Next, we have some items related to conservation. Then we have the Holland Hills School Building Committee is back before us this evening. And finally, we have another transfer from Public Works related to the quote-unquote pile at One Rod Highway. Before I start going through the agenda, does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? Any board members? Seeing none, we'll go to item number 1. To hear, consider, and act upon a request from the Registrar of Voters to transfer $15,000 from the General Contingency Fund to the Registrar of Voters seasonal payroll per the attached schedule for the June 6th special election. That would be this evening, and I would imagine our Registrars of Voters are quite busy, so Mr. Mayor, are you going to lead us through this item?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you. As you all know, we are having a special election, as you just stated, and that was not in the budget. So the cost of the special election estimate is $20,975. The estimated at this time potential departmental savings from their annual operations is estimated to be $5,975,000. So we're asking for a total transfer request of the net of those two numbers of $15,000 from general contingency to the special election line item on the in the registrar's budget.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an item that was discussed during our quarterly review meeting a few weeks ago, correct?
Yes.
Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns related to this item this evening? We'll go to Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you explain to me what the departmental savings means?
That means they're going to, if everything goes as we think it's going to go between now and June 30th, they're going to, absent the special election, they will have a favorable budget variance of $5,975.
Any other? Sorry, Mr. DeWitt.
Sorry. So if everything doesn't go well and we only transfer $15,000, they're going to be over budget?
That's true.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mrs. Leclerc.
Could you tell us what we have left in contingency and what you anticipate needing besides this?
One of the items on the agenda tonight, item number 5, is to hear and consider a request to transfer from the Public Works, to transfer to Public Works from the contingency $289,000. So the 289 with this 15 is what, 311? And excuse me, 304. The contingency, which has a budgeted balance of $400,000, has not had anything taken out of the normal contingency year to date. So that will leave us $96,000 in normal contingency.
96,000? And I'm sorry, tell me, you have the item later tonight, right?
Right. Item number 5 on your agenda is to request from Public Works for $289,146 from general contingency to to fund the removal of the hazardous waste from the aggregate pile at the DPW yard at One Rod White Highway.
Right, and just confirm for me that the number, when you say 96, it's net of that number.
Correct.
Mrs. Leclerc, any other?
Yeah, just, I guess an accounting question. If we didn't transfer this balance from contingency, what would happen?
I would not write any checks, because I only write checks for approved authorizations. So if you did not approve this authorization, I would not fund it.
Okay, but we've already spent it.
We've already committed it.
They've already committed it.
Any other questions, Mrs. Leclerc?
That's it.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, concerns from board members? Seeing none, can you put this item before us, Mr. Brown? Because I didn't do that. Mr. Brown, do I have a second? We'll go with Mr. DeWitt. Any comments from members of the public on this item? Seeing none, I'm going to call for a vote. To hear, consider, and act on upon a request from the Registrar of Voters to transfer $15,000 from the general fund contingency to Registrar of Voters seasonal payroll. And the schedule is attached, and it's related to the June 6, 2017 special election. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? The item carries. That item passes. We'll go on to the second item on our agenda. To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Conservation Commission. Resolved that the town of Fairfield purchase a 2.8-acre undeveloped parcel known as 5655 Park Avenue, Assessor's Map Number 14, Lot 3A, from 5655 Park Avenue, Bridgeport, LLC, for the sum of $167,500, as more particularly set forth in real estate sales agreement between said parties, and further resolved that the first selectman be, and hereby is, authorized to expend 50% of the purchase price of said property, 100% of said funds to be reimbursed by Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection Open Space and Watershed Land Acquisition Grant, and that the first selectman be, and hereby is, authorized to accept such grant, and to execute any and all necessary documents to secure said grant. Further resolved that the remaining 50% of the funds for the purchase of said property be taken from the H. Smith Richardson Conservation Trust as approved by the Conservation Commission on May 17, 2017. And the first selectman be and hereby is authorized to execute any and all documents necessary to effectuate the use of said funds. Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome.
It's nice to be here. Good evening, members of the board. My name is Stanton Lesser. I'm the town attorney. I'm filling in for Brian Carey, who is away on some family business tonight, and I have Ed Jones, who is our open space manager, here with me.
Welcome, gentlemen. Before I turn it over to you, can I have a motion to put this before us? We're going to go with Mr. DeWitt, and we'll have a second by Mr. Mottola. The motion is before us. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has been in the works for quite a while. I know Brian Carey has been anxious to purchase this piece of property. It's about 2.8 acres. He has submitted the 14 points, which I'm sure you've all read. What he's trying to do is combine this with about a seven and change acre piece that's owned by the state, which he is attempting to have the state transfer to us to give us a 10-acre open space parcel up on Park Avenue. As you can see from the documents, there were two appraisals done, and the average of the two came out at $167,500. We entered into a contract with the seller. Contract was subject to the approval by all the necessary boards and commissions of the town. Half of this is going to be paid for by a grant from the state, which I think is part of your package, the award of the grant. And the second half is going to be reimbursed from the H. Smith Richardson Trust Fund, which is administered by the Conservation Commission. However, because money is coming out of principal by the terms of the trust, it requires Board of Finance approval to expend those funds. So I think the rest of it's self-explanatory, and if you have any questions, happy to answer what I can, and Mr. Jones, I'm sure, can answer some also.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, do you have anything you would like to say before we turn over?
I think that covers it, sir.
Thank you. Turn it over to the board for questions. We'll go to Mr. Mottola.
Thank you. I thought I read somewhere in the packet that, maybe if you know or you don't know, that at one point this was a buildable lot, but
Yes.
it expired. It's something to that effect, is that correct?
It was a buildable lot, but the permits, I think, expired about 7 or 8 years ago, so it's a very difficult lot.
Thank you, that's all.
Yeah, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Well, one other thing I would add is the Land Acquisition Committee did unanimously approve this transaction.
So are they what?
They unanimously approved the transaction.
Thank you. Mr. DeWitt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple questions. So I'm looking at this map that was part of our package, which is, it's a little tough to read, but I think it says conservation easement. And I also read that any buildable permits had been expired. So can anyone build on this lot?
Not right now.
Okay.
You'd have to go back in and get permits again.
So it's possible. What does
Yes.
that mean, permits?
I think that I think what you're looking at, I believe it is small. I think
Yeah.
it says conservation drainage easement, and Mr. Jones might be able to speak more to it, but I believe that they have, there's a lot of wetlands on the property, so they had to go to conservation, they obtained their permits, and the easement was probably part of the permit process, although I can't say for certain. But they would have to go back in and get the permits.
Okay. Second, what makes us think that the state DOT is just going to give us 7.8 acre parcel of land right next to this for free? I'm assuming it's for free, right?
Well, there has been some communication between Brian Carey, our director, and the state DOT. And I believe one of our state reps is going to put this into a bill. There's usually a bill that comes up every year for transfer of properties, municipalities from state.
And this will be zero cost, is that?
There may be a filing fee of around $1,000, I think.
Yeah.
That's what the last one was for over on Cross Highway, Sturgis.
My recollection from talking with Brian about this, and don't hold me to it, but I think this is just a piece of land that's not used by the state at this time. So he was pretty optimistic that we'll get it at some point.
Okay. So half of it will be paid by the grant, which we have.
Yes.
Thank you for that. And the rest will be paid for by the existing H. Smith Richardson Trust Fund. So if that money is taken out of the H. Smith Richardson Trust Fund, what will not happen at H. Smith Richardson?
That, you want to say?
That's a basic trust fund for the Conservation Commission to purchase land or to do other environmental amendments or whatever. It's town-wide. It's not for just one open space.
It was established by the same person who gave the land for the golf
That has
course.
nothing
That's
to
why-
do with the golf course?
Correct.
Okay. How much is in that trust fund?
I think it's about
Couple,
300,000
yeah.
now. I believe it's
I think
around
we
300,000.
we just sold a piece of property, and I think that one of the RTM members made a suggestion that the proceeds go back into the fund. I think it was put back in there, so money comes out and money's going in, but it is used to purchase, and maybe to upgrade, but I think it's mostly to purchase property.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, can we get an accounting of that trust fund?
Yeah, thank you. That's
So
where
we
I was-
understand exactly
That's what I
what's
was
in there,
thinking.
how it's invested, what goes on with the proceeds? Because you're saying that this is coming out of the principal, so this isn't coming out of interest or anything?
Correct.
or-
Well,
Not the original principle.
right, not the original, but
How long have we had the trust fund?
Quite a while-
It-
quite a
To be
while.
honest, I haven't,
70s. right?
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Ed says the 70s. It's been around for a long time.
How much was it originally? I mean, what's,
It was small.
It's like 50,000.
Yeah, 40 or
I think.
50,000.
So
It's
it's
grown.
actually accrued interest, but it's considered principal now.
We just feel it's better practice to
I
come
can't
here and
imagine
get
it went from
permission.
50,000 to 300,000 just by interest.
There probably been some additions along the way, but we've spent money out of it also.
In 40 years,
I guess I'm kind of curious how it
Been about
gets.
40 years, so.
40 or 50 years it can accrue.
yeah. Mr. DeWitt, are you good right now?
No, actually.
Go for it.
My last thing is, this, at first blush, this is great. Oh, state's paying for half, there's a trust fund paying for half, but there are maintenance costs associated with this land, correct?
They'd be minimal, I guess, as described by.
What does
Brian.
minimal mean in dollars?
Some signage. I think it's in the
Be
in the
signage
points.
or,
yeah.
Well, it says in here, we're going to put in walkways, and we're going to have, I mean, there seems to be some infrastructure kind of work happening without any assessment of what that cost would be.
Well, it's basically going to be passive recreation, so it'd just be our crew in the normal course of their duties would maintain it, and hopefully we can get some volunteers to come in to help us put trails through. Usually we'll have an Eagle Scout project, and that helps us a great deal. And it's basically our crew does quite a bit.
Okay, thank you.
Can we go to Mrs. Marmion?
Thanks. That was one of my questions, just in terms of maintenance, in terms of cleanup. Do we need to do any cleanup? But the other question is, it's my understanding this is not zoned for commercial development. Is that correct?
No, this is residential.
Residential only. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Walsh, you had your hands up?
Yeah, in regards to that accounting, Mr. Mayor, can we have all the deposits that have been made into that trust fund in the last 10 years? And what their source was?
Do my best.
Thank you. Also, in regards to the proposal, it seems the proposal is for passive recreation. But that determination is not made by anybody in this room other than the RTM, isn't it? Under the town code?
This is being purchased for open space, so I think that the RTM probably could designate it for something else.
That they
but
have to
by-
designate it.
No, by default, it becomes open space, unless they do something.
Well, I think it's open space, but in regards to the active-passive designation, who puts that on there?
I think the Conservation Commission.
I believe with
I
the
don't
state
think,
grant...
that's the
I don't-
case.
I don't
Matter of fact,
remember that being the
I
case.
think that's wrong, actually. I think it's the RTM has to put a designation on it. And that
Well,
only
it's-
came up in the last
the,
5 years.
I think so.
It came up when we did.
That was
Hoyden Hill.
Conservation Commission. They were the ones who granted permission to use that as the ball field.
When we approved it, we had actually put some limits on when we approved it. Now, I don't know whether it was, but when we voted on that, we had a long discussion about making sure that when we bought it, that we acquired it for active recreation, not for passive recreation, specifically for the ball fields. I mean, you may be right, but it's not the way I remember your conversation.
I was on Conservation when we approved that ball field. You talking about the girls softball field up on Hoydens Hill?
Yeah, you might have
we
approved it.
approved
I'm
the
just
use of
saying,
it.
I'm just saying years before when we
Different
purchased it,
parcels. That's not an original open space parcel. That's a
I
parcel
thought the
that was
process
purchased
was
in the
not to
past
have
10 years, so-
conservation
Right.
decide what it is
I-
that we wanted the legislative body of this town to
Right.
make the designation and not conservation.
Okay, under the grant from the state, it'll have to be dedicated to passive recreation.
and I think that
It's
that's
usually
something,
requirement.
when we
It's an
did,
easement.
when we originally funded Hoydens Hill, I believe we had put something in our original funding of that for just the opposite, for the baseball field. Now,
Parcells.
Conservation may have voted,
That was bought with all town funds.
right. Mr. Tetra?
If I might, I think in this case, both sides are correct from a different perspective. One,
I don't think there's any sides, I just want to get to the.
well,
the
both
bottom
perspectives are
line.
correct. As, when the Board of Finance bought the Hoydens Hill property, or voted on Hoydens Hill property, we did try to make it for active recreation.
That's right.
We were told we couldn't put that qualifier on at the time.
Right,
It
but
then
we
goes
didn't
to
do
the
that.
RTM. The RTM is the only folks who can do that. If they do not do that,
Right.
it becomes open space by default. So
Right.
that's for a normal transaction. In this case, because of the grant, as Mr. Jones was pointing out, from the state, we only get that money if it's for open space.
Yeah.
So this property will be open space by terms of the purchase.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's going to the RTM, correct?
Yeah, it has to
They don't
for,
want it to be
Yeah.
if they don't want, they can not buy it,
Not buy it.
or buy it and use it for passive, but those are open space. Those are the two choices.
Under this method of funding, because we're taking this grant.
Because of the method of funding, correct.
And what would happen if down the line, because I thought they had the right, I thought they had the right to change the designation anytime they wanted to, on any piece of open space that's out there.
I
What would be-
believe
what would
if
happen?
there are,
Look,
I don't know, I'd have to
Right.
look at the code.
Could you look at the code and get back to us?
Sure.
Because I think what has to happen then is I think we'd probably have to reimburse the state for their funds.
oh, if that happened, correct. I think there was a case like that for the St. John Vianney's property. It was a question of if we did something based on how we acquired it, we couldn't use it for anything but open space at that time, if my memory's correct. But you're right, we probably would have to reimburse the state to make them whole.
Yeah. Because this is a purchase, the RTM has to approve it anyway.
Tell
believe
the
there's
state
enough-
when we get the money from them, we'll give it back. That'll work.
Check is in the mail.
What type of property topography is this? Is this flat?
No.
No.
Access is very hard. It can be accessed by foot. You could put a driveway in, but there'd be an extensive fill.
Okay.
It's just a development cost, I think, when a large part why it was not followed through on. Of course, the economy went up and down too, but the development cost on the lot would be substantial just to get the car down there, let alone build a house.
Well, in regards to like a field, is there ever a possibility there could be a field there?
I doubt it very
Okay.
highly.
How about the property next to it? Have you looked at that 7+ acres?
I haven't walked that entire acreage.
You have?
I haven't.
No,
I
okay.
know Brian has.
Yeah, okay.
But I don't think that's conducive either.
You don't think it's conducive? Okay.
And if the state gave it to us, those usually has a caveat that it has to be passive open space now.
Okay.
There's also a land map from 1989, I think you're referring to. It's all parcels that were designated open space before that. That year may be wrong, is designated open space under the Conservation Commission. After that date, the RTM designates whether or not it's just managed by the Conservation Commission in lieu until it's a use is designated, or if it's actually dedicated to passive open space. Was an amendment to the charter made on that.
Okay. In regards to the purpose and justification, one of those is for the recreational area for residents, and then it says, and for the growing population at Sacred Heart. What does Sacred Heart have to do with this? I'm kind of confused. Because we're going to be maintaining this as our taxpayers, maintaining this piece of property. And it's going to even get...
It's fairly minimal. If we do put a parking area there and a trash can, that's about the extent of it. And the trails themselves, we just walk through every 3-4 weeks and cut it back. This is, I think he's referring to the new campus, the GE property on the other side of the Parkway, which is walking distance. Also, we don't have an open space in the extreme northeast corner of the town.
Mm-hmm.
That was another driving factor of it, just to get dispersed. And
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? We'll go to Mr. Becker.
What about some sort of a deed restriction?
there will be one for passive open space if we accept
From the state,
state.
it will go on to the deed.
RTM approves it.
And that's not as simple as simply handing the money back to the state at that point either, is it? I mean, a deed
Take it
restriction.
back.
No, they may take the money back, but the actual deed was then transferred with that restriction on it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking of some,
There's
there's some,
over the property,
right.
there's
Okay.
a map with those notations that become part of the land records.
Yeah, I'm thinking of some even privately held, property around town that has, deed restrictions. It's a little different than just
Yeah.
simply changing it, so.
There's a number of different arrangements that are done with private open space, too. I know the Aspetuck Land Trust holds some easements over properties, one of which is over by Sasko Hill Beach. The property on the left, as you just go down, they have a open space easement on that property. And
Yeah.
along the seawall.
Yeah, no, I know exactly where you're talking about, that one. I'm
One
thinking
of,
Perry's Green, I mean, a couple of different ones in that area, yeah. Okay.
So I have a question if nobody else does. Does anybody else? Mrs. Leclerc, go right ahead.
I'm still struggling with the purpose of the property. Why do we want to acquire it as open space? And what if we don't acquire it? What becomes of it? Is it buildable? Can someone actually build a house on it?
Yeah, there was an approval for a house out there. They've since lapsed and expired.
Okay.
But,
But they could go back to zoning
Back in
and
to
get
do it.
permits.
And it's quite a disturbance just to get the house back there. And every piece of open space we acquire in the Mill River watershed, when the water quality's compromised anyways, these can all, with the next item on your agenda, go towards the TMDL, that we're actually taking an active steps to address it. Those are the unfunded mandates from the EPA that are administered by the state DEP, that we have to bring the water quality up to a certain level that they've designated.
Okay. So these grants, the one from the state, if we don't, is it specific for this property?
Yes.
That we couldn't use it for something else? Okay. And then the same thing with the H. Smith Richardson Trust Fund. That one, we could, with approval, use that for other things in town?
It's limited to what it can be used
It's,
for.
yeah,
Okay.
it's, the Conservation Commission controls that fund,
Okay.
and they're the ones who decide what to do with the money. So it just happens to require approval of this board if you're spending money at a principal, but they administer it and they decide how it's spent.
It's checks and balance. Keep everybody honest.
We're not talking about initial principal. The way the trust reads, the prior year's interest earnings roll over into the
Roll over.
principal.
So they can use current year interest for expenses and stuff like that, but anything related to prior year,
Right.
they need approval because it's principal.
Correct.
Mr. DeWitt, did you have something?
I'm curious of your comment about Mill River, and I think it says here, the preservation of the site will also have an indirect positive effect on the water quality of Mill River, as you just stated. Is that because we'll be in control of the land?
It won't be developed. Won't be a septic system
Doesn't sound like it's
on
gonna
it.
be
There won't
developed anyway.
salts used on the driveway. Hopefully, there won't be as many pets.
But you're going to make it into a walking park where people are going to bring pets, so I'm kind of confused
Yeah.
how that becomes. It sounds like you got a big piece of, here's where I see this. 2-point-some acres of undeveloped land that someone bought for $122,000. Not too long ago, 2,000, I think it is. We're getting it for only $40,000 more, so you're not making a whole lot of money on it. And you've got a piece of land that's undeveloped, and we're losing tax revenue. I'm at a loss to see the upside here, other than, and we're going to have to maintain it, even though it sounds like it's minimal. Yeah.
Well, it's hard to place a value on some aspects of open space.
This town has been acquiring open space since John Sullivan. I mean, we have more than 1,000 acres. It's just something that we do. We always take that opportunity. If it's a halfway decent piece, I mean, we have a history of doing that in this town.
Like, understand.
no.
Okay.
This was all contingent upon the state giving us the 7 acres also, because Brian has told me if the state doesn't go along with that, that we would not take the property. That's just-
I was going to ask that. Can you say that? That was my question. This, you're talking about trying to put 10 acres together in
Yes,
order to do
that-
walking trails.
Yeah, the 10 acres is actually, if it's just for habitat or for watershed protection, 10 acres is a significant area, as
But do-
opposed to 2 acres, which is,
Okay, so we buy these 2.8 acres, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump the line. 2.8 acres. And what happens if the state doesn't sell us the 7, or sell us? They'll probably try to sell
I
us.
believe Brian wanted to just walk away from the deal then.
Okay, so this is contingent on
In
us
his
getting
mind
the
it
other
was,
7.
as
That's
he
It's
said
not what
to
this
me.
says.
It's not written
I don't
that way.
think it is. It's not contingent. I'd have to look back through the contract, but the only contingencies are the approval by the boards.
Oh, no, this was,
And the resolution is definitely not contingent.
No, the
No, I
purchase-
didn't think the resolution was. I
Right,
just
and-
want to know, to Mr. DeWitt's point, right, you're buying 2.8 acres. Okay, great. What are we going to do with it if you don't get, I understand if you get the other 7 acres, right? Then effectively for $167,000, you acquired 10 acres of property. Yes, there might be some maintenance with it. Yes, there's some really good environmental opportunities there, right? And yes, there's some passive use opportunities there. That's a much more attractive deal than getting 2.8 acres, which,
Well,
What are we
it's-
gonna do with it?
Well, it's still 2.8 acres of open space, which the Conservation Commission thinks is a good idea to buy. I mean, that's their jurisdiction. I mean, they want the open space, and they're willing to expend funds from the Smith Richardson Trust.
no, it's actually
to
our
purchase it.
jurisdiction to say whether we'll let them spend the funds.
They do need your approval.
Agreed. So or we wouldn't be here. So I'm just asking the question, what do we do with the 2.8 acres if we don't get the other 7?
You have 2.8 acres of open space, I mean, which is, we have areas that are smaller than that in town now.
I had the same concern when I saw that it was hoped that it was paired with the property next to it. And especially now hearing that Brian might have an issue with it or not want it. Because are we trying to form an area of passive open space with walking trails for 10 acres? Or are we just on this small little 2.8 acres really going to be doing open space trails large enough that people are going to want to go up there passively to do it? And that's not you as a lawyer to determine that, so I'm not asking you. I'm asking really the administration. I mean, I guess since Brian's not here.
Yeah, and I don't think
I
Brian,
mean,
And
maybe-
by the way, Brian had a family issue, so we
yeah,
understand.
big time, yeah.
Yeah, I know, I understand.
But I think Brian still wants it, okay? I don't think that one is contingent on the other, but again, you're going to have to ask him.
Well, the issue is, like, we have these pocket parks, which are nice in little neighborhoods,
Right.
but driving around to each one of them and cutting the grass doesn't come with no cost. If we keep adding these on and on and on, we have to maintain more properties. And I'd just like to know what the thought process is, whether we want the 10 acres,
Right.
and that's what the process is, or the 2.8's fine.
I believe Brian was fairly confident after talking with our state reps, I think it was Brenda Kupchak, that it was going to go into the bill,
Okay.
and it was moving forward. He had talked with the DOT administration and DEEP, about that. So I think he's fairly confident, but until it's a
Tetra?
done deal, it's...
It's not a done deal, but there's wheels in motion, is what you're
Yeah.
saying.
Brian has spent a considerable amount of time on this, and we talked about this at the Board of Selectmen meeting. While I believe that contract itself may not be contingent on this, the whole concept is about putting 10 acres together, and the 2.8 gives us access to the 7 acres. I believe that sits between the road and the 7 acres, if I'm correct on the map.
Mike, do we have any
So it-
documentation back from the state about this at all?
You'd have to, I don't believe so, but I believe that that's been the whole discussion. That's what Brian's been working on, and the reason he's pushing for this going forward is because he believes he's got the commitment from the state to put the 7 acres there, too.
So do we have what's the timing issue on this? I guess, I certainly don't want to miss out, perhaps, on acquiring 10 acres for this, but we're not getting any documentation on the 7, right? From the state.
It's the way the state,
Yeah.
the state doesn't do things ahead of time. They basically, you get on a list, but I believe Brian's has a commitment that, as best we can at this point, that this 7 will be for, and that's why he's pushing for this. I believe the timing issue,
Is the
has to
7
do-
contingent on this?
Probably not, but I don't know.
Yeah, no,
I believe they're separate transactions. I don't think you can tie up the state based on something else, and I don't believe you can tie up this based on something happening at the state level. But
can we walk away from this and not do it if we don't get the 7?
No.
Well,
So-
yeah, here's simply, if I can. Yeah, we won't sign the contract. I mean, it's subject to approvals on this, but if one of the approvals is subject to the, getting the 7, I think the timing issue, it's not in the agreement, it can be in this approval. And I think somewhere I've got to sign that. But I think the issue here is that the only timing issue is that the 2.8 acre property is subject to foreclosure. We've held them off so we can complete the deal, because in foreclosure, that stretches out for a whole nother length of time, perhaps, potentially somebody else gets the 2.8 acres, which I believe is access to the 7. The 7's not as exciting without this.
Got it.
Is there a contract to sale on this?
Yes, there
Is
is.
there a reason we didn't get that? We always seem to get
Yeah,
it.
I know, I have it.
Okay. I'd
And there
like
is a
to
contract
I'd like
to
to
sell,
see
and
it.
as I said, the only conditions,
Did the Board of Selectmen have that contract
yes.
when they voted?
I believe they did, I don't know for sure.
Mike, was that in your packet when you voted?
The, Brian stepped us through all of that, so I don't remember whether the entire contract was there or not.
We seem to always get the.
I would have expected it would have been part of your packet.
Okay, I'll read you the contingency. The buyer's obligations hereunder are contingent upon the buyers obtaining, 1, approvals of the purchase from the Fairfield Land Acquisition Committee, Conservation Commission, Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and RTM. 2, a favorable report as a result of a referral to the Fairfield TP&Z, which I think has happened. 3, receipt by the buyer of the aforesaid grant from the state of Connecticut. And 4, approval by the appropriate town of Fairfield bodies of the expenditure of 35% of the purchase price, collectively the approvals. The buyer shall take all necessary actions to obtain said approvals and shall pursue such approvals with due diligence. If any of the approvals are not granted, this contract shall, at the option of the buyer, become null and void. So, once this is approved by you and by the RTM, I think you have a binding contract, and I think we're obligated to buy it.
What happens if we approve it with a contingency? That we have to acquire this other piece of property?
Yeah, you might be okay there. I mean, because the contract is, yeah, that might work. No, I don't think we have to change the
Don't change
contract,
the
because you don't have a
contract, it's just
full
your
approval
approval.
by this
It's just the
board.
approval.
Right.
Right.
So our approval's really not effective until we have locked up the other parcel.
Yeah.
Now, what does that do effectively? I like that. It's an elegant solution to it, but what does it do in terms of getting this done?
I think this board is meeting in July at some point, correct?
Well, we're not supposed to, no.
We're meeting in August?
Here's what I would see as the worst case. Your approval is contingent.
Yeah.
For some reason, we don't have the approval on the 7 acres at some point. It would give Brian a chance to come back before this board and explain what his description, what his discussions have been, and how reliable it is. Give this board a chance to remove that as a contingency if you chose.
Right. Mr. Becker?
So, so two things. One, the if we approved it with those terms, it'd be in our resolution, it moved to the RTM with that. So I would think that they would then have to go back and approve it without whatever contingency we put in. So it's not just us, it would kind of be 2 steps. Maybe that's okay, but
The
just thinking it
RTM
through.
could approve it however they wanted, and they could approve the deal. It still wouldn't have this approval, which is one of the keys to the board. So without this approval, it has to have both. So the RTM could approve it with or without that contingency, but it would have to have, your contingency would hold up both approvals that are needed.
You asked about time constraints. I think this is a short sale.
Okay.
So,
I think there might be some time pressure from the mortgagee, but
And also the state grant. I think
Not
there's
done.
a sunset on that,
is there?
Stan?
especially now.
Can you look at our schedule, our calendar?
So,
please?
Mr. Lesser?
Can you look at our calendar, please? Look up our calendar of meetings.
Yeah, there's always a time limit on those grants.
Yeah, but I don't know, let's
Did you
just.
literally just?
Yeah,
did
Dave,
you
go right
literally
ahead.
just step over me?
Huh?
Okay, so on that end, if that's what we were to do, I would suggest that we make sure that the RTM is aware of that option and the way we structured it so that that can be handled the right way. With summer coming, that's obviously a problem.
I think complete communication between this board and the RTM would be essential.
So the other thing is, what is the timeline with the 7-acre parcel and the state? It mentioned that had to be a part of a bill. Their session ends at midnight tomorrow, and they have a special session. But if this is sort of in process and hasn't been put into a bill, typically those types of things just get bumped to 2018. So if we put this in and we've got a contract, at some point, waiting potentially a year.
Yeah, I don't think anybody in this room can answer that question. I think that's a question for our state reps. That wasn't something, when it came to the Board of Selectmen, that Brian was worried about. He thought that would happen on a fairly timely basis.
Okay, so it's in
So, and I
process
apologize,
in
without
some
Brian here, I can't relate the
form.
past, because he's been the person heading up the discussion with all that, but there's nobody here in the room who can answer that. It's a reasonable concern. Either we get to Brian or as soon as we can on that.
Okay, so the other thing is,
And Dave, if I might finish, just
No,
just
go
to
ahead.
add on, so not
Of course.
finish, but add on. I
By all
think
means.
Brian will be back here before the RTM meeting, so some of that can be clearer for the RTM. So certainly any conditions this board puts on it would be clarified for the RTM so that we'd have more complete information at that point.
okay, thank you. So where I'm at with this, if others on the board want to put those contingencies in place, I'm I'll go with them and certainly vote for it. I think where I'm at, though, I'm not entirely thrilled sometimes with taking these parcels and a little bit cautious here. In my mind, I consistently, almost every time I drive past it, point to a parcel that we were going to get for free, that we swore up and down, had no use for us, very unlikely to have any buildable use, and now it's got a duplex and a bunch of kids and expenses, and we would have been better off figuring out a way to put a park bench on it and taking it where it was. And every time I drive past it, I say to myself how annoyed I am at not voting to accept it. I don't think that there's a great likelihood of something here, but I point to that. I point to the prior approval of potentially a house, and yeah, you get the revenue, but you can also get some significant expense to it. I think we're better off just taking it, even if it's at the 2.8 or so in here. And I think there's a use even for a small pocket of open space. And I would hope that we get the 7 and change and make it 10, because I think that really solidifies it for us. But I will vote in favor for the transfer tonight. But again, if others want to put a contingency, I respect it, and we'll certainly support that too.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Appreciate that. Anybody else? Mr. Walsh?
I presume there was a Phase 1 done on the property?
No,
No?
it's never been commercial. It's never,
I don't know what properties ever are. I'm always nervous buying properties. I mean, there's not one client I would have buy a property other than a residential where there was a house. Because, I mean, I just had one recently where they found PCBs on the property because of a transformer that came down off a telephone pole. So
I don't think there's any intention in doing a
the
phase
problem
one
is
here.
that we have very deep pockets, us. We're a $300 million corporation. So, and we're going to be here forever. So we're always going to be on the hook for it. Do we know all the past uses?
I think it's been open space. It's just been vacant land, as far as I know.
Been woodland.
Yeah, I
pasture
think we're going to
before
have to start thinking about whether we want to do Phase 1s. I mean, that only costs us, what, $1,000?
I don't know.
I mean.
Yes.
Yes.
I was in that business.
I mean,
And
it'd be $1,000, and we buy them a bunch of insurance.
And again, I think,
No, not Phase 2, just a Phase 1 where somebody looks at the property and we do a survey of what happened in the past.
I think Mr. Carey, again, has been over this property extensively, because that was one of the discussion points. And I don't mean to speak for him in doing that, but I also don't mean to suggest nobody's walked the property, taken a look, and done something like that. So, again, Mr. Carey could answer that more completely, but again, he's not here tonight.
Anybody else?
Your concern's very real. I don't
I
mean
mean,
to...
I just think that if we're going to be buying properties as a town,
Yes.
we should probably, there's not one corporation I know that would ever buy a piece of property, residential, commercial, anything, without there being a Phase 1 done. No. Because number one, they're going to be here if they're a successful corporation for a long time. It could be, hundreds of years. And number two, they normally have deep pockets.
Yeah.
And that's, for $1,000, it might just be a one-page report that says everything's fine.
I think that's a very reasonable point, and certainly I'd be in favor of, but again, I think that Mr. Carey has been over this property extensively from that standpoint.
Well, I'm not saying he's not been over it extensively. He could have walked every inch. Something could have been spilt there that was known about. So, I mean, I've had clients buy properties and found out that there's, there used to be 80 years ago a gas station where they left the lifts actually in the ground and just cemented over them, which were filled with a certain type of oil. And then my client was responsible for it. So that's when if you don't, I don't know, I just think that we should start having a policy that if we purchase a property, it's not very frequently that we do it, that we spend $1,000 to do a Phase 1 and at least dot the i's and cross the t's.
Makes good sense to me.
Anybody else? Seeing none, do you have an amendment you would like to propose?
Not written down, but.
I'll give you a couple minutes.
Okay. Should I
Yeah,
write something down?
sure. Any other questions while we're waiting?
Administration.
I
will,
wrote
during this
something
ti-
down in anticipation.
You wrote something? Let's hear it.
Something, if you accept it. Such resolution shall be contingent upon the acquisition from the state of the adjacent 7.23 parcel of undeveloped land that is currently owned by the Connecticut Department of Transportation.
Are you good with that, Mr. Walsh?
Yeah, I'm good with that. I guess the other question is, are we going to do the Phase 1? Should we make that a contingency?
Yes.
And a Phase 1
And
evaluation.
the town will do a Phase
Phase
1
1
prior to
environmental
purchasing the
testing.
property.
Correct. Is that your amendment?
Yes.
Do we have a second to that amendment? We have it from Mrs. Leclerc. The amendment is now before us. Any questions, comments, or concerns from board members on the amendment?
I have a comment. Go ahead.
Mr. Tetra?
If I might, just a clarification.
Yes.
Realizing we're dealing with the state here, is it a question of getting a close on the 7 acres or a commitment from the state on the 7 acres?
Commitment. Commitment, I think.
I would be fine with the commitment. Oh, yeah, I'm not for close, so as long as we get
I just- given
something
the
in
state
writing,
takes
something
time.
you have something in writing.
Theoretically pass their conveyance bill, which issues this with a whole bunch of other properties to towns.
Yes.
Something
it's
like that
by
would
commitment.
meet the intent in the agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
Depending, and I don't know the answer, but I just want to bring this up, that depending on how long this takes, you may lose this piece, either by the grant expiring or by there being a problem with this seller having to do something with the property. So
Let's see what
you just have to
Mr.
know that. Yeah,
let's see
we
what
may
Mr.
know
Kelly
more
has to
when,
say.
and I can talk to the lawyer. Anthony Musto represents the seller, so I can talk to him and find out what, I think that there was some pressure on the seller here, so
I appreciate that.
Does the grant expire?
that we
Some
don't
point.
know. I don't have those documents. Brian would probably know.
Mr. Mottola, did you have a comment or anything?
No, I was
Okay. Anybody else?
going to talk about that.
Okay. Anybody from the public? Seeing none, we're going to vote on the amendment. All in favor of accepting the amendment to this item? Opposed, abstentions? That item carries unanimously. Now the item as amended is before us. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? Anything from the public? I'm going to move the item as amended before us. All in favor? Opposed, abstention? That item carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Now we're going to go on to item number 3.
I'm sorry. There was one no?
Mr. Chairman, I voted.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that, Mr. DeWitt. I missed it.
Thank you.
That's pretty rude. Sorry about that. Okay. Thought I silenced that. Someone was dinging before, and I thought it was an angel getting their wings. Isn't that the old thing? And then my phone rings. It was a big angel. All right. To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Conservation Director. Whereas it is in the best interest of the town of Fairfield to enter into contracts with the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, DEEP, to secure a United States Environmental Protection Agency Clean Water Act Section 319 non-point source grant in the sum of $81,747 to fund a project entitled Mill River Wetland-Based Plan Development of WBP and Water Quality Monitoring Program. Now therefore it be resolved that First Selectman Michael C. Tetro is hereby authorized on behalf of the town of Fairfield to expend up to $81,747 to fund said project, 100% of said funds to be reimbursed by said grant, and further resolve that the First Selectman is hereby authorized on behalf of the town of Fairfield to accept and expend said grant, and further resolve that the First Selectman is hereby authorized on behalf of the town of Fairfield to enter into and sign said contracts, and further resolved that the First Selectman is hereby authorized on behalf of the town of Fairfield to provide such additional information and execute such other documents as may be required by the state or federal government in connection with said contracts, and to execute any amendments, rescissions, and revisions thereto. Do I have a motion to put this before us? We'll have Mrs. Leclerc, we'll have a second by Mr. Mottola, and we need to get a new writer, 'cause this material is very dry. All right. Who is speaking to this? Welcome back, Mr. Jones.
How are you today?
Please talk to us. Please walk us through this.
It's on the face of it, it's a watershed study. It's all in response to the water quality, to be in compliance with the TMDL again. It was an unfunded mandate, and Brian's managed to get them the funded part of it. It's 100% funding.
Right.
Great thing.
Getting money for the state.
Does anybody have any questions on this item before we go forward? And this is coming directly from the state, right?
Yeah, through the state.
Do we have any concern that they are not going to pay this bill?
No, we have a commitment from them in writing.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns on this item? Seeing none, does anybody from the public? If not, I'm going to call the item for a vote. All in favor of accepting this item? Opposed? Abstentions? That item carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right. Item number 4 on the agenda. To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Holland Hill School Building Committee. Resolved that the bond appropriation entitled a resolution appropriating $17,300,500 for the costs associated with the improvement and renovation of Holland Hill Elementary School and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation be and hereby is approved. Do I have a motion to put this before us? I'm going to take Mr. Brown. Do I have a second? Mrs. Marmion, you want to second this? Oh, okay. The item is now before us. Welcome, gentlemen. Before I turn it over to you, first of all, I want to, on behalf of our board, I want to thank you guys, your board, for all your hard work and effort. You came before us several months ago with a project that had a bit of sticker shock. You were kind enough to arrange tours for our board to go see the school, which was most appreciated and very beneficial for all of us. And you've gone back and reworked the project to reduce the funding. So I thank yourselves, as well as your entire committee, on behalf of our board, for all your hard work and effort on that. So thank you very
Well,
much.
thank you very much, Chairman. I'm back.
Every time you
also-
come back, you cost us money.
Yeah, I know. However, I cost you less money this time. We were down, did a lot of work with the Fairfield Board of Ed office people here, and I apologize for my voice, but I have some issues that are not going to go away that easily, so you'll have to bear with me. But we spent a lot of time reworking and looking at all the ed specs, and then we went back in with the architect and with the committee and went through and we really did almost like a zero-based budgeting of every square foot in that building.
Let's use this
Okay? Is that any better?
It's fine.
Okay. We took out 6,432 square feet from the project. That was all new construction. And when you do that, given the rate per square foot, that meant we saved $2.1 billion. Okay? We then also looked at the renovation. And though we didn't change the square footage, we went through and looked at every single part of that renovation and reduced the cost, the square foot cost, by $40 a square foot, which may not seem like much, but on 43,000 square feet, it is much, like $1.7 million. So those two added up to $3.8 million. Unfortunately, however, when you take away all that 6,000 square foot of new construction, you still have a great deal of new construction, but less square footage to put it over. So your square foot costs go up. And that cost us $1.2 million. Bottom line, we ended up saving $2.6 billion just on the construction aspects. We then took a look and cut $300,000 from the design contingency. Because based upon what we did at Riverfield, we felt that the architect, the CM, okay, and Colliers did a magnificent job so that our, what do they call that? Issues, we had 1.2% variance from our drawings, which is very low. So we cut back on the design contingency. So that ended up to $2.8 million. And that's where we're at today. We cut back close to $3 million on this project. Meanwhile, meeting all the educational specs. And from now on, I'm going to let my two guys with voices talk to you. George, the architect, George Kattinger, will take you through the site plan and the floor plan. And then Chuck from Colliers will take you through the financials.
Thank you very much, Mr. Quinn.
Thank you.
Good evening. Basically, your packet has small drawings of the floor plan. And as you can see on the board here, all the blue on the back of the building is the addition. Where did that 6,000 feet came from? This used to come straight across and back down to the middle of the library. So that's the area that was eliminated. And that area was eliminated because we made the renovation in this side of the building more compact. As opposed to restructuring and changing program needs, we kept it the same. So the basic addition contains 5 new classrooms to meet the 24 classrooms that are required by the ed specs. It contains a music room. We've got a new performance platform for the gymnasium, which is also a combination instrumental music room. It's got the required spaces for toilets. We've got 2 special ed classrooms. And even though the green areas within the existing building, relative to new additions, we're putting a small addition on the kitchen. That's to meet the cooler freezer requirements that are necessary to support the kitchen. The green areas are renovations going on within the existing building. All the existing toilets are going to be upgraded to ADA accessible within the kindergartens and first classrooms. Staff toilets are being upgraded as well. There's going to be renovations to the gym and to the APR, replacing floors. And even though the majority of the existing classrooms are shown as white, the entire building is receiving new sprinklers, air conditioning systems, ceilings, and lights. So that's common to the entire facility. All the lockers within the existing classrooms are being replaced. They're all within the classrooms. They're going to have to stay in the classrooms because the existing corridors are too narrow. There's new sinks, new millwork going in there to make the sinks accessible as well.
The bottom line on all these renovations that is happening is the fact that this school will now be equal to the other schools that have been renovated. It will not be surpassing anybody, nor will be deficient to anybody.
On the site plan, you can see the yellow structure is the existing 54 and 76 building. The blue, this is kind of upside down now. The addition is facing the ball fields. We're creating a paved drive across around in the rear of the building for emergencies as well as security. New paved play area. The existing playground is going to be reconstituted. We're going to lose one of the playgrounds because of the grading required by the addition pushing into the fields. The large green areas that you see are existing wetlands, and the light gray lines are the setback areas. The existing parking lot is basically going to stay the same. We're going to change this lane. We're going to cut it back and restrict the buses to the front half of this building. We're going to put a fence across the existing island. Now parents will hopefully be able to drive through, and there will be the parent drop-off area on this side of the building so that we can hopefully unclog the traffic jams that we normally get.
And that's been reworked a little bit, too, from the original
Absolutely.
concept.
Oh, this is substantially reworked.
Yes,
Yeah, because there was a lot of money being spent on that originally.
Yes, sir.
you're correct.
Can you just clarify, parents will hopefully be able to drive through? What does that mean exactly?
That means they used the wrong word, because they will be driving through.
They will.
Yes.
What's going to assist and to get us beyond hopeful is that we're going to place a fence in this island which will stop parents from stopping in this narrow lane because the kids won't be able to walk across the island. So they'll have to drive past it where they can get off against the curb. This side of the parking is going to be expanded to meet the EdSpec request for 90 spaces. There's also a lot of infrastructure work being done here that you don't see to absorb rainwater that's required by the Conservation Department. But that's basically it in a nutshell.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we want to run through the costs, please?
Sure. Chuck?
Yeah, very high level. The prior estimate when we came back to you was approximately $20.8 million. And the current budget that we're proposing is roughly $18.5 million, of which $500,000 of that is for unforeseen hazardous abatement that we don't know about. Within the construction estimate, we are carrying $325,000 of known asbestos abatement that we've already performed sampling and testing for. So that amount, I'm sure Tom can opine, is going to be set aside. That's the only thing that it'll be used for. If it's not funded or bonded or used for the project.
Bottom line is, we elected to put $500,000 on contingency basis to be used only for hazardous material. We recognize in the past school projects, we've had upwards of $1 million virtually in every school, okay, in terms of PCBs and asbestos problems. We're spending in this plan $460,000 for remediation, okay, and consultant work. Okay, we have elected to put in the $500,000 into the proposal, saying that we don't know what's in the walls or anything else, but we don't want to go back, and I don't think you want us back either. But you know, so it is one thing: it will not be spent for anything other than hazardous materials. It is not a silk purse of something that we're going to keep to cover any overruns. It is for hazardous waste.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments? Well, you're going, so why don't you continue?
Yeah, out of the 18 million, we're estimating building construction itself to be roughly 14.3 million. That includes escalation to midpoint of construction. And as Mr. Quinn noted, we're carrying about $716,000 for owner's contingency. It's roughly 5%. It is tighter than we usually do, but we're confident based upon our performance at Riverfield with the quality of the design documents, the construction manager, combined with the building committee and ourselves to manage that contingency to get us through the project.
How much of the cost, the 17 million, how much of it is expansion of the school versus renovation of the school? Did you break it out at all? I thought I saw it, but I want to make sure we go on the record with it.
Did have that.
Or we talked about it at an earlier time.
I just did that calculation recently, too. You mean, oh, thank you much. There we go, Peter. Yeah, so in the construction costs for the 14 million, the new construction's roughly 4.2 million. The renovation costs are a little over 5.5 million, and shared costs, site costs, and general conditions, et cetera, 1.5 million.
Wait, that doesn't come up to the 14 or the 17?
That would probably be, that would equate to 11.3. The remaining balance on that is for design contingency, escalation, CM contingency, and then general conditions for the general, for the CM, as well as CM fee. That's contractual items that would be added on top of what we call trade costs. And we have the estimate. We can provide that if necessary.
Okay, so you got 11.2 million, of which 4.2 is the new construction, and 7 is related to the existing building as well as shared costs,
That's correct.
right? So if I take that and I say it's $5 million roughly of new construction, right? Because I'm taking the 1.5 and kind of splitting it,
Sure.
right? And then that comes to 17.2, you're asking for 18? you're asking for,
Yeah, the 17 is the delta between the 18.5 and the previously approved amount of the $1.24 million that was already approved.
right. Yep, I'm just trying to step it through myself here.
What's that? You have 700, was that number 700,000 left out of that 1.2?
1.2.
1.2 is left?
So you got 6 million.
Was the amount that was bonded originally.
How much of that have you burned through?
How much we burned?
Yeah, how much have you gone through of that 1.2?
About 500,000.
Yeah, because that's about, yeah, I was saying, it's about
Yeah.
$700,000 difference between the two numbers, right?
Okay.
Not including the 500.
So if I take the 6 that is left, so I take the 7.2 and I say you're asking for 17.3, roughly 6 million left, that is all kind of considered in one bundle? Is that the way you're looking at
That'd
it?
be essentially, you're looking at soft costs.
Right.
You're saying $6 million?
That's what, I mean, excluding the 1.2 that you've already had,
Okay,
right? I'm saying you're asking for 17.3.
correct.
Subtract that 11.2, you're left with 6.1. That gives you the 6.1 divided by 2.
Yeah, so the 11.3, so let me just kind of clarify. So 11.3, when we do the construction estimates,
Yeah.
Peter's from Gilbane here, they estimate the trade cost, because when we go out to construction, they put out bid packages
Right.
for concrete, brick, steel, et cetera.
Right.
The estimate on those is 11.3 million. When
Right.
we get the GMP proposal from the CM, they're going to add on CM contingency, general conditions for trailers, staff, project managers,
Right.
superintendent, et cetera. So the 14.3 is the total, is the construction estimated cost. So the delta between the 14.3 and the 17, you have fees and expenses, architect's fees, OPM fees, materials, testing, labs, owner's contingency, all the fees and expenses on top of that.
Thank you. Mrs. Marming?
Thank you, and thank you for all your hard work, and thank you for taking what the various boards, their feedback, parents, staff, et cetera. You've done a really nice job, so thank you for your hard work. I have a question about timing. Let's say this goes forward. What's the plan in terms of when the construction would go forward? And I know you're going to time it towards summer, but what about while school is in session? Walk us through the timeline of what this would look like.
So I think the anticipated start date is somewhere around February or March. Right now, we're seeking approval to move forward to go to final design. So the final design would occur, we have to go to the state, we have to get permission to bid. We anticipate somewhere around February, a start date of February 18, with an anticipated move-in date, which still has to be scrubbed, for August of 19.
And how would you proceed in terms of school being in session? What's your priority? Would you do the new construction? Would you do just kind of?
So it would be a phased approach, very similar to Riverfield. The new construction would be built first. We would then swing classrooms into the new construction and renovate half of the existing school. And then when that's done, you swing into the half that's been renovated and renovate the other half. We haven't gotten quite through all the logistics of it, but very similar to Riverfield, and based on the magnitude of the renovations, it's a workable plan.
So one other question. So let's say you find the PCBs, you need to do remediation of some sort. You can contain that? School can go on? I mean, just wondering.
Yes and no. Depends upon the severity and the location, okay, of what we find, and to be very honest with you. But normally, we're able to contain all the asbestos and keep it away from any staff or students. We would not permit any remediation to spread around anybody. Okay, because that's not the purpose of what we're doing.
Just to add on to that, the bottom line would be any abatement would be done during summer months. And there's really 2 summers to accomplish that.
Mr. Brown?
Yeah, first of all, I think this committee also did a great job. You guys, like Mrs. Merriam said, you did listen to the boards, and we don't get to say this too often, but this committee, I believe, set out to do exactly what we asked you to do. And it looks like it was accomplished. The question I have, when is the next RTM meeting?
We'll be on their agenda for the 19th for their committees, and on the 26th for a full committee.
Okay, so right before July 1.
And then we will have the educational personnel, Sal, will be filing forms to get to the state by June 30th.
Right, okay, for the 25%.
Absolutely. Yeah, we don't know what next year's going to bring, and it's really pivotal, and we're worked hard against getting it approved.
Sal, could you come up? Mr. Morbido, can you please come up? Sorry. Thank you, sir.
What I'm reading from your minutes, if we missed a deadline, we may get 10% reimbursement, if anything. Now, is it 25% pretty
Yeah,
much
Can Mr.
guaranteed?
Morbido, can you speak to this for us, that we want to make sure we're all on the same page as relates to the deadline? That's what you're getting to, right?
Right.
Deadline, excuse me.
It's sketching.
Yeah.
I've been around them too long. The deadline for filing is June 30th, so that it can be put on the priority list for the following spring for the legislature to act on the bond. We have to meet that deadline, and the state takes 6 to 7 months to actually process behind the scenes to get it ready for the state legislature to act on. The application has been started. It's sitting electronically up on the board, waiting for the final, the key that we're missing is the final funding. That's something that we have to bring to them.
Tell us about the
before.
toggle at June 30th, though. The difference between if this doesn't go at June 30th versus goes...
Okay, what happens, the set dates in statutes are filed by June 30th. Middle of October, the state will determine categories of priority. There's a priority A, B, and C, depending on the particulars of the job. By December 31st, end of the year, they'll package us and whatever other school construction projects there are in the other 168 municipalities, put it into a funding resolution, bond resolution, that will go to authorization, that will go to the legislature. They usually get to school bonding around maybe late March, usually April, sometimes May.
But this...
Sometimes it could drag out.
But they've already told you, I guess what I'm trying to get to, I'm leading the witness here.
Sure.
Is there's supposedly a percentage differential between a project that's going to be requested as of June 30th versus one that'll be requested after June 30th?
What we have right now, there's been no law change to law, but there are proposed changes to the law coming July 1st. Whatever they do in their special session, I don't think they'll get it in their regular session. Would take place July 1. One of the proposals that's on the board is sliding the reimbursement ranges back 10%. So that would take our stated reimbursement rate right now for this year is 25.46%. If it's all, everybody's moved, we would move down to 15.46.
Could they move that anyway, retroactively, in fairness? I mean, could they go back and say...
Take it back to the first of the year. I don't believe that they can. I believe they can take it back to the fiscal, but I'm not a lawyer.
I think, however, we do know they can do anything they damn well please.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Said that very eloquently. Clear, too.
I'm trying to be diplomatic.
But it's more at risk, anyway.
Yes, we are. Yeah. My judgment, my feeling is that if we pass it now and get it in by June 30th, we give a shot at 25% stated rate. After July 1, it's a
Then
horse
who
race.
knows? I agree.
Who knows? And my guess, 10 to 15%.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Questions, Mr. Walsh?
When you say we have a shot at it, so it's not guaranteed that if we get in by June 30th, that we're going to get 25.46% reimbursement.
Indications now from the Office of School Construction Grants is that if we file by June 30th, we're following the published reimbursement rate, which right now, for this calendar year, is 25.46%.
It's just that there's a lot of articles, especially from the budget director for the governor, who suggests otherwise.
All of the, from what I've seen, and there might be another proposed legislation out, all the effective dates are July 1.
I did meet with Sal, with the state people, and they did make that comment.
What would the percentage go against? It's 25, the total budget, the 18 million?
No, it would go against what are called eligible costs, where once the final plans are developed, there's certain elements that might not be given reimbursement, such as something that's determined to be a repair, for instance. If we're trying to think of something, replacing a broken blind, that $100 or whatever for that would go into an ineligible column. We'd basically break up the costs into eligible costs, ineligible costs, and we get reimbursement on the eligible costs. Another example is they don't pay for infrastructure that goes beyond the property line, such as if we had to go out to the middle of the roadway to get to a water line, they would not pay from the property line, from the curb line out.
The new ceilings and the fire suppression and the lighting in the section that already has it, where we're upgrading, is that a repair?
No, that's an alteration.
That's an alteration.
And that's reimbursable at 25.46?
Correct.
Yes. However, you are right, Mr. Walsh, that the state maintains control of what they call eligible and ineligible. Okay, so let's be clear. Okay, we can try good faith effort, which we have, but in the final analysis, when they do the audit some 8 to 10 years later, okay?
Your point is still valid from one of you gentlemen said before. To have any shot at the 25, you got to be in before June 30th.
Absolutely.
Right.
If you
Other
don't do
than
it-
that, you might not get it anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, Jim, can I just, on that topic, before we move on, what you just stated, my recollection is, it's always been that way, right? The eligible costs, they always.
The eligible, yeah.
That hasn't changed over the years.
It hasn't, the breakdown of eligible and ineligible costs hasn't changed. It's the particular agent that you're working with.
Right.
With their particular interpretation of an item.
Thank you for that. Mr. Walsh, my apologies for the interruption. Did you have more?
So out of the 18 million, what percentage do you think, do you have a dollar amount you think that, based on your history of working with the Riverfield and other things?
Typically, we've been net reimbursement on these projects have been running somewhere between 20 and 22% on this type of project, an addition alteration project.
Okay.
Might be closer to the 20% range because we slid down on the reimbursement rate from last calendar year to this calendar year by almost 1 percentage point.
Okay. Do you know what it was on Riverfield?
20, it was 26.29, I believe.
That was the end percentage?
That's the gross percentage. That's the basic rate.
We don't have that percentage yet, right?
The final
audit hasn't happened.
Hasn't happened.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's roughly, we were looking at those today, we're roughly about 7% was deemed ineligible for construction costs, and then there's also a prorated share for the soft costs. I think it's roughly around $850,000 at Riverfield. Rough estimate for this one, based upon eligible, is about $16 million. You're looking between probably $4 and $5 million reimbursed from the state at the effective rate, but again, subject to audit.
Okay.
Mr. Walsh, anything else?
Not right now.
Do we have other board members who have questions on this? Can the superintendent come on up if she's here? I knew she was here. Thank you, Dr. Jones. Also, thanks to you and your staff for working with the building committee on the ed specs. I want to make sure we're all set on that. This is the building that allows you to deliver the program that you need to deliver to Holland Hill.
Indeed, it does. Yes.
Okay. There's been a lot of talk in the town about enrollment levels. And why are we building a bigger school when enrollment levels are flattening out to declining at the elementary school level? I wanted to give you the opportunity to address that head-on as we sit here.
It's a complex issue because
Yeah.
you can look at buildings really in two different ways. And one is the amount of rooms that you just have in a building, and then the other one is programmatic usage. And we still have some work to continue to do to help community understand programmatic usage. And what I mean by that is when you build a 504, you'll have 4 classrooms for each section. But if we have what's called a complex learner cohort, for instance, one of those classrooms is used for special needs. Next year will have 5 of those in the district. Our pre-K program right now started the year at about 122, which is mandated by law. It's our ECC. 122. Right now we're looking at possibly 190 students next year. So we will be out of space at ECC. So we're really having to work all through this summer to really look at usage, because I think there's a lot of analysis by people who don't understand what's actually inside the buildings and what our program usage is. So we're going to be doing a lot of work this summer. Mr. Collin and I have already met on that as well for facilities.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have follow-up questions from board members on this specific topic while we have the superintendent here? Yes.
When you say a lot of work, you mean better educating the public of how we utilize our school space? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, I think it's better educating the public, and also for us to be able to make sure everybody has an understanding how buildings are actually used. It's kind of like when you talk about a building number. If you have 4 sections and all 4 are full, you can grow a little in enrollment, but you can't add a whole nother classroom if it's not there. And people tend to just count rooms and forget that they're actually little children and not jelly beans that you can kind of sprinkle around. And it is a very hard it's complex. Thank you. You're welcome.
Other questions related to this item? Mr. DeWitt?
Just a comment. I think most of us toured Holland Hill, and the day that I toured, the superintendent was there, and we spoke to the principal and the superintendent. And I can't remember the name of the room. It's a common usage room, and we were deliberating over it the last time, how many we had to have versus Riverfield, and you gave a great explanation of, if you get the 504 kids, you need a minimum amount. If you have 400, then those rooms are expanded for other purposes. So your point is valid, and I encourage you to educate the general community, because I didn't quite understand it until you talked about it, that it's more minimal spacing for the maximum amount of children versus the fact that when you have less than that, you've got more space to use.
Right.
So it's complicated, but if I could figure out that, I'm sure everyone else can get to it.
I'm right behind you, by the way.
Yes, I know. Thank you, sir.
Other questions on this specific topic or others while we have the superintendent? Becker.
So on that, when the school opens in August of 2019, with this configuration of classrooms, based upon the population that's in there today, obviously we can't exactly project out and go up or down a little bit, but based upon that population, what is that usage, what is it going to look like? Speaking to the fact that some of the classrooms that you may be projecting out would have 20-something students, may only have 2 or 3 for specific use or things like that, what's the building going to look like? Or what would it, in that
Yeah,
sort
I
of
mean, and
hypothetical?
honestly, I wish I could answer that question 100%, but it's a projection. What I
90%
can
is
say,
fine.
is Holland Hill is full, and the idea when they open that they could have 4 sections on each grade level is highly likely. Could it be a classroom with 20, and you can still be growing at 21, 22, 23? But it's highly likely it will be used as the ed spec is written.
In theory, based upon that, with 4 classrooms per section, that would be every single room, including all of
It could be, and one of the things
it's an
where
addition
we
in
are...
some capacity.
Right, and one of the things we're going to have to really watch is kindergarten enrollment. Because, over 2 years, depending on what happens in kindergarten, and our kindergarten enrollment on that side of town was higher last year.
And obviously, when you get to a certain threshold, you get to a certain point, you absolutely have to open up another class within the section. But are you finding that some of the classes are getting closer and closer, but you're sort of holding them to 3 sections because there's just literally not classrooms at this point? Is that
At
or
Holland
you're-
Hill
Yeah.
specifically, we've added trailers there, and so that's helped with
That's
that
sort of
pressure.
just how
Right.
you're-
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly what's happening.
Okay.
What's the enrollment today?
Oh, goodness. I'm sorry, I don't have it right in front of me.
Somewhere around 407, I think. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I'd have to send that to you. I want to make sure I give you the right number.
I
Yeah.
recall it being 4.
I have it actually back on my chair, I think.
I don't have it.
We don't know the enrollment of Holland Hill?
I have it, actually. I have it on my
I
chair
think
if
we
you want me
need
to walk.
that. I think we
Sure.
definitely need that.
We can't count that one.
I think you can count to 18 million.
Holland Hill on October 1 was 404. That's their official count.
What were the surrounding schools around the same time?
And today they're 406. October on our official count, Burr was in 413, Dwight was 337, Holland Hill 404, Jennings 317, McKinley 449, Mill Hill 384, North Stratfield 397, Osborne Hill 445, Riverfield 425, Sherman 484, and Stratfield 419. That's October official count.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Mr. Becker?
So, I think when you go back and sort of reevaluate some of that and maybe how it's sort of being put out there for the public for the debate, the 504 term is, maybe it's a literal term, but it's perhaps a little bit misleading if I'm sort of understanding from your interpretation. And it would maybe be helpful if we started to shift that conversation away from that, if it's from a programmatic standpoint, it really isn't ever really going to be used at that sort of number. I think that...
Dave, can I follow up on that for a second?
Yeah, certainly.
Because instead of actually talking about that over the summer, we're about to vote on something here.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it right now. So a 504 building, right? What does that mean in true capacity for children?
It can mean 504, but then it could eke up to 520 because you're going to have a few classrooms that are a little bit too big and there's nowhere to put the children, and that's usually when we add trailers. But it also could take all those classrooms sitting at 20 for a while and they're still full, so then your number is lower. Like Holland Hill right now has 2 sections that are already at 4, and then it has 4 sections that are at 3. So as they continue to grow and you add another section, but they may be smaller because they get really big, you add a teacher and the numbers go down and then it starts growing again.
But what's the optimum level? If you build a school for 504, what's the optimum number that you can reasonably manipulate around?
Yeah, it's usually somewhere around 450 because we're going to
Because why?
Well,
Right.
we're going to have unique programs also around our district, which like CLC. it's going to take one of those classrooms. By the time we have a CLC, or we have to add another behavioral program for special needs, programs that are unforeseen today because certain populations are growing with this unique program, and you try to spread those out around the district for the feeder pattern, and then also so that you have as many classrooms available as possible in one building.
Can you give a few examples of those programs, and please don't use the abbreviations.
Yeah.
Tell us what they are. 'cause I don't know.
Complex learner cohort are for students who have significant special needs, and we have those programs around the district, and not at every school. But as the numbers grow, like next year, we anticipate we will have 5 classrooms. Are anticipating that we are going to need space shortly for expanded early childhood, which is our special needs program at the ECC, because we are full right now at that building as well. We know that in probably by 2018, we are going to need some sort of behavioral program, which is really to help children who are having significant needs in that area, because right now, if we have a child who has a significant need, we pretty much have to look at outplacement if we don't have a program in the district, and right now we don't. So that would be an example of 3.
Mr. Mottola.
So just following up on that, if I understand what you're saying, ideally, you would like your schools to be at 450. That way, you could accommodate all those programs that you mentioned. If you get to a 504 school, if it's actually at 504, then you have to make some decisions as to where to house some of those other programs. You may have to move them to a different school that has more space. That's kind of what you're saying. Am I understanding you correctly?
That's correct. And I think Sherman is probably a good example because there are 4 sections on every grade level except second grade, and they're at 484. But you have numbers that are like in kindergarten, they're the 18s and 19s because they're lower. So if they happen to be on the right grade level, that building will work a little bit longer. But if they happen to be third graders who are moving in, it's going to get more challenging because they have 4 sections that are 23, 23, 23, 24.
Thank you.
Sure. I'm going to go to Mrs. Marmion. I think you had your hand up, then I'll go to Mr. Walsh.
So you mentioned the behavioral program. Are you're talking about at all grade levels? Are you talking about
These are elementary specific programs.
elementary specific
Yeah.
programs?
It's
So
something that they're working on in special education, looking at possibly in the next budget cycle.
okay, so is it limited to elementary, or do you go into middle and high school as
They're
well?
different at every level, but often what happens if you put a program in at elementary, you will grow it to your middle or your high school, or you have a different need because of the age of the students. It's a different type of program. Could be even be a consultant-based program.
So that was my next question. What does that look like? It's an integrated classroom, but then you have, what does a behavioral program look like?
Usually there are usually about 8 students that are in there, and it's a teacher who is a BCBA trained so that they understand how to really help children thrive in a school environment when it's difficult for them for a variety of reasons. And it's focused on helping them have the behavior that's going to be able to function in the general education environment, hopefully, ultimately.
So I'm trying to understand. So it would be a separate classroom where the kids would be all day, or it would be just sort of?
Well, anytime you talk about special education, you're talking about an individualized education plan. So there is no, one classroom for every child. We have to fit the needs of the child. So that could be very mixed. There could be some children who are in there 2 hours a day, and some who are in there for, half of the day. The goal is always to have children in the regular environment as much as possible in general education.
And is this at every elementary school, or you're talking about it would be centralized?
Just a unique, what I would consider a unique program. Just like with our complex learner cohort, we don't have those at every elementary. We wouldn't have enough students. So if you have a program and it, say, has 8 or 10 students, then you wouldn't want to have that at 11 elementaries because you would have 1 child perhaps in a class.
I see.
Yes, so they're localized.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Walsh. Thank you, Mrs. Marmion.
So what you're saying is that these schools are no longer 504 schools. You've got to at some point, as a district, tell us that they're not 504 schools, because they're not. Because you're running all these other programs out of them, correct?
Yes and no, and I think that's why we have to do a better job educating, because you could have a unique program in a school, and you may still have class sizes where you're heavier, for instance, in upper elementary, and there are more students in a class than they are in early childhood. Early childhood numbers are lower. So, you know, the building, really, what you're counting on is 450, and then you're looking at what is the cushion in the area if you have to add a class or if there's a unique program.
But that, to Mr. Walsh's point, that's kind of what he's saying, is that
They're 450 schools.
they're 450 schools.
They're not 504s.
Well,
I mean, this whole thing was sold to us by Dr. Title, really, to do this 504, so that they held 504 students, and that's what we banked on. And now you're telling us that because of all these programs that are being run out of here, we're really, what we thought was a 504 can only hold to a max 450, because you need these other classrooms for these other really special education programs, and they're really special education rooms, additional special education rooms.
And every year is different, and that's what makes it so challenging, because we may have 5 CLCs next year, and 3 years from now, we may need 2. And it's every year what makes it very difficult when you're planning for buildings. And there is no magic number knowing exactly how many unique programs you're going to need or exactly how many classrooms you'll have available. And that's often why school districts end up having to add trailers, because you'll have a tough year or two for some unique reason. A really large kindergarten can really make a building difficult. You know, McKinley had 5 kindergartens this year. We anticipated they'd probably have 3. So that's a big change in that building.
But you have that ebb and flow of the years of the, what you've articulated here is that you've also had a growth in special programming. Is that?
According to need, yes. Yeah.
According to need. Now, I want to be very clear here because I want to understand it. I'm not, right? Is that need growing because it's mandated? Is that need growing because it's required? Is that need growing because we're building the spaces so we're utilizing them? Tell me about that need a little bit, because as with anything, right, all of a sudden you have an additional room and you start using it, right? Is that the case, or is this growing because it's being required and mandated?
No, when we talk about the unique programs that I've mentioned, they're required by law, and it's meeting the needs, the individual needs of all children.
Okay, now are the laws changing that are requiring more of these programs, or are these existing laws and we're just seeing more children with these
No,
needs?
the law has virtually been unchanged since 1974, PL 94142. And when it was enacted in 1974, I think people didn't understand the law as well as they do today. As school systems, we've had to make a lot of changes over the last few decades based on Supreme Court
Litigation.
decisions, lots of different things, to make sure that every child who wants to be in our public school system has what they need.
Okay, so while the laws have been on the books, the interpretation of the laws has changed, or the rival to the laws. So you're being required to provide more programming, utilizing more space because of what you're being mandated to do by this development.
What I would say is that I think children's needs are also changing over time, and I think if you even watch, you know, what's happening with the autism spectrum, that's one area where we just don't know a lot about, and there's a lot of research that's being done in that area. But we do have more children with significant needs than we think that we knew about 20 years ago, and that may be the case as well. We may be getting better as educators at helping families.
Yeah, and I think also parents have become a lot smarter, okay?
Well, that's kind of what Dr. Jones had said, yeah.
And what I've seen at Riverfield over my 5-year career there, okay, is the parents coming in wanting more testing for their children, and then the placement into special classes, okay? But in no turn, I've never seen any movement to fill up empty space, just to fill it
I
up.
was asking the question because it routinely, that's kind of a normal.
Yeah, and I understand what you're asking, because I was an elementary principal. I've been a principal at every level. When I was an elementary principal, I opened a brand-new elementary school. It was only half full because it was a growing district. So we had a geography lab. We had all kinds of spaces, because you're going to use the space effectively, but we are actually needing the space.
I think it was one of the surprises going through on the tour of Riverfield to see the number of classrooms that are being basically used for special programming, which I think we all thought was going to be used for classroom space.
Right.
And I can't remember the exact number, but it appeared that there was at least 4 classrooms that we thought there was going to be students in, that there's some form of special education going into those classrooms.
Well, it's not really a
All day.
special education issue. They have, you have reading specialists, math specialists, all sorts, and if there's an open room in an elementary, it's going to be used for something. I mean, they won't leave it just empty. And they make good use of the building, but you're building the building to make sure that if you have that many students who really come and enroll, that you have the classroom space to add a first grade classroom without having to go back out and have $500,000 in trailers.
But I guess the question is if our population is declining, and we're now adding more capacity, at what point do you look at it and say, do we just keep adding more capacity? Just because someone will find a use for it. You're telling us it's a classroom on this diagram.
Yeah,
But
what
in
I would.
actuality, if there's 4 or 5 classrooms that are not having children in them.
Yeah,
it's
there's
like
not
fifth
4 or
grade.
5 there.
I don't know. I
yeah.
mean, I'm just saying, I thought we were making Holland Hill bigger because you wanted swing space for other things, for McKinley, for all sorts of other things. But if they're not being used, I think we got to know, if that's not what their intended use is,
Well,
I guess we have to know about that.
Yeah, if you're going to build a building for 504 and you expect the day it opens to have 504 children sitting in the seats, it will not work that way. And that just school enrollment doesn't. But I do know that in part of our long-range plan is when the district was talking with Malone and McBroom, it was also looking at making sure we have capacity in the district, because some of our buildings are very small and they're full. And so, you know, we're trying to make sure we have the capacity going forward.
Okay, how many students are at Riverfield right now?
At Riverfield, they have,
24.
yeah.
So, in a way, that looks like
Yeah,
there's
14.
75 student or more, almost 80 student capacity there.
Yeah, so at Riverfield, they have 428. So right now, they have 2 sections that have hit 4, and then you have those other 4 sections that are at 3. But that's also the building that's planned to have one of the unique programs in 2018, if that ends up going forward. So they really have 2 open classrooms, which is not a lot. And that's why I say if you look at the enrollment, and especially kind of in that area, if we get a big kindergarten class that is zoned for that building, they could be full in September. And that's one thing that makes it difficult.
And where do your enrollments look, or when's your last enrollment projection study that was done?
Well, that's going to, we do one every October during the budget.
Okay.
So I would say refer to the budget book if you want the most updated numbers.
Okay. And is that, when you look at projections, are you seeing projections going down at the elementary level?
You know, it's,
Over, say, the next 5 to 10 years?
yeah, I would want to go pull the projections, actually, just to, because it doesn't swing wildly. That's why I don't have the number right in my head. It's not, we're not having huge enrollment swings if you really go and look at the number. This year, we're losing a large 5th grade class going to middle school, and I think it kind of throws it off a little bit. But what is kindergarten going to look like in September? Makes me a little nervous that at ECC, we have 190 possible in the fall. And we were at 120 starting this year. So do we have a lot of little people out in our community in these new houses that just haven't enrolled yet? And that's always a challenge for us.
And I guess it's where those houses are being built, which we should know. I mean, you know, you could see where most of them are being built. They're still being built in the Sherman District.
Or sold.
No. McKinley also.
Okay. Where are the big developments in McKinley?
Up around Pine Tree Lane. There's a group 9 condos that are just being finished now.
Okay.
Okay? 2 floors. Okay? I mean, there's all sorts of new developments around. But I think the key really is, you know, is this, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting I'm not used to this. The key is, you know, Holland Hill is out of room. I mean, it needs room. And we're here today to ask you to approve for Holland Hill. And I understand the concern going forward, but that is a different topic.
Was it said earlier that you plan, once this is built, that all those rooms will be used?
At Holland Hill?
Yeah.
I said it's highly likely, looking at that, but I would like to pull the projections and really tell you what they look like. And a lot of it depends on kindergarten. This building doesn't open, is it 2 years, right? So we'll have the kindergarten classes coming, and then you'll have the third class behind that. So you could have 3 grade levels in that building that are larger than anticipated. We don't know until they actually show up in kindergarten. Because sometimes our kindergarten numbers are actually fairly accurate, but maybe there's more enrollment in one building or the other, which is what happened last year, like at McKinley.
Are we telling the state in regards to the racial imbalance issue that school's going to be potentially used for racial imbalancing towards the plan?
What we have said
Because
to...
it seems to be that argument you just made is counterintuitive to that, because you think that it potentially might be filled already with just Holland Hill neighborhood people.
That's why I say if I could do that for a living and be able to tell you in 2 years, I would be a millionaire, because school districts would hire me all over the place. It's really, that's a very difficult thing to do, so we rely on our Malone McBroom projections. But if they're off by 20 children, they're still pretty accurate, but that's a classroom. You know, I mean, so they can be really pretty accurate across the district, and your numbers can ebb and flow. And kindergarten is always the hardest. Luckily, in our district, we don't grow a lot from first grade to second grade or second grade to third grade. Kindergarten is the year that really is difficult.
Mr. Mottola.
Yeah, I'll be rather quick. I was on the Board of Ed when we started looking into, what capacity we needed, and we came up with that 504 number, and I actually think we're exactly where we thought we were going to be, 10 years ago. The idea behind this was to give us some wiggle room and cushion in those years when we get up to a 504, even higher capacity. So we wouldn't have to always necessarily get portables, consider redistricting every 3 or 4 years, because that's not what the town wanted. And I mean, the 504 schools that we have now, they're all in the 400s right now, if I'm reading this correctly. So the idea was to be in the 400 numbers, but with the understanding that if we got up to 504 or higher, we could deal with it and not have to get portables. And we understood, when I was on the board, that these numbers were going to ebb and flow over the years, that we were going to have lower points, but at some point, it was going to go back up. And this is... we looked at this and understood all those things, and this is how we planned. And, I've been off the board for I don't know how long now. I guess it's 7 or 8 years. And quite frankly, if you told me that Burr was at 325 students and Stratfield was below 400, then I would have a concern. But, the 400 number, we're right kind of where we anticipated we would be. And we have that wiggle room to deal with it if it happens.
Thank you, Mr. Mottola. Mr. Brown.
Well, just to follow up on that, I think what I learned tonight is it's not about 504 kids, it's about the programs. So if you have 504 kids, you're actually going to need trailers to accommodate the programs.
If you didn't have a unique program, and if you have a unique program, like I say, next year you could have 4 of those in the district, and the following year you may have 3.
Right. So, but when we say 504, it's not just 504 students. It's as you stated, I think it's more complex than that. It's about, it's about what, 4?
About 4 classrooms on each grade level.
Okay. And to accommodate, so it's about classrooms, kids, and programs.
Right.
And that's what you were aiming for? Okay. All right, thank you.
Do we have other questions from board members on this? Or I'm going to broaden this out now and say any other topics related to this item. Anybody?
I'd just like to get their most recent projections when you have them.
In October?
It concerns me because I think we're dealing in a time, with all the stuff that's going on with the state, there seems to be a lot more people exiting this state. No one's coming in. If you look at it, people are just leaving this state because of what's going on, and it's not getting any better because we're going to be taxing our way out of it, which is going to cause more people to leave. So the numbers in the future, unless there is some miracle, which I don't see happening based on what I'm seeing the legislature
not
doing and just arguing between each other, is everyone is going to be some form of tax that's going to come, whether it hits at the state or the state is cowardly and pushes it down on the municipalities. And this town, if that happens, is probably going to be at more of a disadvantage than some of the poorer towns, because You know, it just seems like there's a Robin Hood mentality up at the state. So it could have a negative impact in what happens and whether people are moving here. And people are, I don't think anybody's arguing that people aren't leaving this state and going to other places. And, you know, they're taking their kids with them. They're not leaving them here. So these numbers concern me, that we're going to have larger numbers of declines in some of your enrollment figures, and that's not being taken into some of these reports right now, until some of the drastic things that are going to happen.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'm going to open it up to the public for any quick comments. Oh, Mary, I missed you. I'm sorry.
I just wanted one follow-up question, because Jim was asking for more information, and it's one that I don't have a good understanding of, and that's those special programs. Can you give us some and I don't need it right away either, but can you give us some kind of history on where those special programs are located, or how many you have and how many you're projecting for next year and future years, just so we have like some kind of an understanding, because I've never really thought about that extra space need. And on the budget side, we seem to always be struggling to keep up with the costs for special education, and it seems like we do a pretty good job, and keeping it in-house is a good thing. So I want to just get a feel or an understanding on how that all fits together.
Yeah, and just so you know, it's not new for us. This has, I think, been around for a long time. I think the only reason that it's coming up, I'm using a unique program because people are looking at 4 classrooms on each section and not realizing that we have people in town who are just calculating numbers, and they'll put that number out like there are all these open seats that are not open. There are children in those classrooms, and that really is the point of it. Not the specific programming, but the program is required by law for to meet needs of children.
Thank you. Mr. Walsh?
Yeah, but I think some of those people are doing those calculations because your predecessors have done a horrible job, and the board has done a horrible job in knowing about those programs, but selling us that we have 504 seats for students. I mean, I voted on some of these schools. When I hear that we're building a 504, I think we're building a 504. I'm not thinking we're building something for a capacity of 450 because you have all these programs you want to run in these classrooms that you're telling me is a 4th grade classroom or a 5th grade classroom or a 2nd grade classroom. It's really your language, and I know you're brand new, or it's going to have to start changing in regards to this subject. And the board is going to have to start changing their language in regards to this subject.
I think it does go back to where we started the whole conversation, that there's misunderstanding about school enrollment and how we place children in classes and building utilization, and it is very complex. And certainly I can work to do a better job at communicating that for us.
Yeah, because what we were told before is, yeah, we're building 504, and we kind of want to build them to 90% capacity of that. That's what we were told.
Yeah.
I think everybody at this table knows that. And if you don't, I can give you plenty of commentary on that we voted and talked about it at this table. The same people that are at this table know this.
Yeah.
And Dr. Title told us this.
And I think Dr. Title is correct, and that's what I'm trying to say. There are many different ways to look at school enrollment and school utilization, and if you even look at the Malone and McBroom when they're calculating our projections, they'll look at a birth rate model. There are lots of different models they use to even calculate our projections, and what I'm trying to get you just to understand, we have 4 classrooms on every grade level. If there happens to be a unique program, one of those isn't available.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just want to add, because years ago I served on the Elementary School Space Task Force, or whatever it was called, and we did calculations, and it was swing space that you could go 10% above and 10% below.
Yeah.
And that was Brian Fagan and Jack Boyle. That was way before Dr. Title, and that's how it's always been considered. So that's why I'm kind of interested in knowing the other piece of it.
Yeah, and it is hard. I mean, it is difficult because kindergarten enrollment, you can project it, but it's not always where you think it would be. And once you enroll them, they're here through 12th grade, for the most part.
Thank you. Chris?
Just one quick thing. To follow up Mrs. LeClaire's question about the programs, are those special needs programs, do they have any other town children coming into those programs, or is that purely a Fairfield,
Those are
Connecticut?
Fairfield program, Fairfield
Just
Public
Fairfield
Schools.
program.
Yeah.
All right. With that, I'm going to turn it over. If anybody from the public wants to make a public comment, feel free. Come forward, state your name, address, and be brief.
Hi, I'm Jason Lee. I'm the Vice Chair of the Holland Hill Building Committee. The key thing, the reason I'm up here right now is because what I'm hearing about special needs and usage of the room. My daughter is a Holland Hill student, will be graduating or moving up, whatever you guys call it. She is a special needs student. She, for the past 3 years, have been doing her work in the hallway of Holland Hill. So I ask you, when you talk about what's that room used for, if it's for one child for Holland Hill, for special needs, think about that for a second. We all have kids. How would you like if your daughter was in the hallway? Where's her privacy? Where's her safety? If any of us who work now are working in the middle of the hallway at our companies, what's the first thing we would do? Where's our safety? Where's our privacy? I need an office. I need a cubicle. Get me out of the hallway. Why can't we get the kids out of the hallway? We built this school designed for those specific things, looking up and down within a budget. I think we filled that need. I think sitting here saying these rooms aren't used for this and this. So are you saying that the kids in mainstream should only get the classrooms? I ask for your full support that the BOS has already approved for this project. Thanks.
Next, thank you, Mr. Lee.
Nick Asa, Board of Ed Liaison to the Holland Hill Building Committee and former member. Just one thing, I want to just say that I think there is a lot of public confusion and misunderstanding, like Mr. Walsh has been talking about. But Mr. Walsh, you mentioned that you were sold on 504 capacities at 90%.
Mm-hmm.
That's 454 students.
Okay.
So, in theory, when Dr. Jones is talking about 450 students, we are actually accomplishing our goal of a 504 school by being at 90%. And I think while we might be slightly under those numbers at 428 at Riverfield, we're creeping up and approaching that 454 number. So I think we're doing a good job. So while I understand and respect what you're saying, I think we also need to remember 90% capacity. And that's what you were sold on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what the district is trying to do. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Alex Durrell, RTM 364 Woodcrest Road. Basically, I just want you to know the RTM has, does, and always will support a 504 school at Holland Hill. Please also keep in mind that the TP&Z has accepted a 29 apartment building complex on Maritz Street, which is within the Holland Hill School District. So there's probably going to be a few more people coming in on that. Regarding the 504, there's 6 grades in there. 6 grades means 84 students per grade. That's not too much. If you want it to be 450, that's 75 students. You're going to need three classrooms per grade. I think that's pretty logical. Also, finally, I think through the board to the Holland Hill Building Committee, which has done an excellent job, thank you. The next valid election on a national basis is in November 2018, a rather large midterm election, I imagine. How will the school be able to handle it? If it's going to be under construction, I imagine there's going to be a very large turnout.
First of all, I'm there to build a school for kids.
Registrar of
Okay?
Voters will take care
Registrar
of
of
that.
Voters
We
is
will-
responsible
thank
for
you.
elections.
Okay, thank you.
And by the way, I'd really like to get busy building that school.
Next question. Thank you. Next comments by anybody? Good evening.
Berkeley Murray, Holland Hill parent. I have
fifth and fourth grader, former PTA president at Holland Hill. I actually was at home watching this in educational access, and the 504 topic came up, and I ran down here because I really do believe you're missing the boat on this. You get out of your cars and you walk around the Holland Hill district and you look at the neighborhood that we live in. There is building going on. Every street has at least 2 houses being knocked down, new huge homes going up, so you have a lot of elders moving out of the neighborhood, new young vibrant families coming in. You also have our new train station near our neighborhood that is walking distance. It is attracting families by droves. Greenfield Hill, houses are sitting on the market. Our houses are going up. The second thing is we are centrally located. You have a lot of families around us. I'm not going to say the big R word of redistricting, but you're investing in our communities. This is a highly populated area of our town, as is Osborne Hill, as is Riverfield, as is Sherman. And if you're investing in our community, you're investing in bigger schools where there are more people, instead of investing in schools that are outside the main areas of our community. 450 at Riverfield, I was taking notes as you were all talking. 450 at Riverfield is 90% capacity. 90%. That's what we were, that's the top of what is optimal for our children to learn in. You come, I know a lot of you came to Holland Hill, you toured the school, you looked at how cramped it is. That is at over 100%. We're at like 115% capacity at Holland Hill. It is not optimal for our children to be learning at those big of numbers. And neighborhood schools, the people are, and actually my husband tweeted me while I was, or texted me while I was sitting here because he was listening to you also at home. And you talked about people leaving Fairfield. They're not leaving Fairfield. They're leaving Hartford County. They're leaving those upper areas of Connecticut. They're moving outside of the upper areas. We're driven by New York City. We're not, people are not leaving this county. They're leaving other areas. People are moving in here. So that's all I have to say.
Any other comments? Hello.
Hello. Lori Branscombe, 117 Pemberton Drive. I just wanted to again thank the building committee as well as Dr. Jones for all of their time and attention to detail. They've spent so many hours at our school and in front of all of you boards, and I also want to thank you as well for all of the time and effort that you've put in. Our school really does need this renovation, and they need it now. We are bursting at the seams. We've all, reiterated this many, many times, but this is really a major problem, and we need this passed now. You've heard from all of the parents. We've shown up at the meetings. You've gotten our emails over the last year or 2 years. So now is really the time that we're looking to you to pass this budget so we can get the school that we need.
Thank you. Anybody else? So I want to comment before I go back to the board.
Somebody else wants to
I'm
speak in the
sorry.
back.
Please, I didn't see him. You're too big. I can't see around you, so I missed her.
Hi, my name is Mary Lupo. I'm at 95 High Road. I have a current first grader and 2 more who will be attending Holland Hill in the future.
So you're the one.
My husband and I moved to Fairfield 12 years ago in large part due to the reputation of the schools in town, coming from other Connecticut towns. And when my son started kindergarten at Holland Hill, I was impressed with his teachers. I was impressed with the curriculum, not so impressed with the school, the building. And hearing that, the music teacher was pushing his piano around from classroom to classroom because he didn't have his own space. And I felt that it was very detrimental to their learning capabilities. And so I urge you to pass this budget because I think for all the students there, they really need to have the building to facilitate the learning that they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? And duck in the front row so I can look now. I feel compelled to comment only because of what a few of the speakers said, because one poor woman came from home and thought that, something was going on here, and the 504 got her all riled up. Our job is to take a look for the town as a whole. And we get a lot of emails both from people that want to do a 504 school, as well as people that don't understand what a 504 school means. So the goal that we have to do in common, if we agree on this, is explain it better, right?
So to say yes, Nick, you got up, you said, hey, it's 450, that's 90%. Okay, well, why is 90% okay? That's the better question. Why are we aiming for 90%? What's that other 10% capacity used for? Now, I don't think that's an overall complex issue, okay? I think we overcomplicate it when we try to explain it, or when you try to explain it, right? 90% capacity, because we have all these special programs at each of these schools, and we don't know when we're going to need them, what we're going to need, and what we're required to perform. Here's a listing of the programs. Here's the number of students every year that are in these programs, and they're sprinkled throughout the district. So this is the way it works. I think it's in the way that we communicate and we talk to each other, because my colleagues are right. I don't, quote-unquote, blame Dr. Title or anything, but when there was 504, it was always capacity for a school is 504. Optimum is 90%, but we can do 504. Well, guess what? You really can't. You can't. You said it yourself. If you get 504 at Holland Hill, you're back to the hallway. Or portables. Right? That's the conversation we need to have so we're not talking past each other. So don't read into the comments here. This board asked tough questions. And damn well we're going to continue to ask tough questions because it's your tax dollars. And we have to ask those tough questions. So I would encourage you to, have that conversation and understand where those questions are coming from and comments and how we do it year after year after year. All right. End of soliloquy. Anybody else have anything else?
Yeah, I'd like to just make a statement.
Sure.
I am a firm believer in special education, but I want those rooms planned. I want you to tell me, doctor, when you have a program that you need these rooms, or you need another building for these rooms. If everyone's supposed to be mainstreamed and it has to be spread across the district, I understand that. But I want to see more special education rooms on these plans, even if we have to build more, when you tell us we need them. When I see your plan here, I presume that there's enough special education rooms, I think there's 9, that you need. If you need more, you better tell us right now. Then that's the way the building should be built. But we go into this trying to plan for the town and plan for an enrollment of students. And when we're told it's 504, we use that number 504. But if we need more special education rooms, I went on the tour of Holland Hill. Those special education facilities were horrendous.
Deplorable.
Deplorable. I mean, we talked about it during the tour. We have always needed more space there. And I was happy to see more rooms planned in here to be respectful to the safety and to the extra needs of some of these children. But we just need to have those marked on here. And if you have a plan that you need 5 rooms for a specific thing, you better build those rooms in and dedicate them. And that's kind of what I'm getting to, because I think the conversation, as Mr. Flynn said, has to change where we start thinking these schools as a lower number. Because if people add up the capacity of the schools, that's what's going on. People add up the capacity, they look at the total number of kids in the elementary school, and oh boy, we have enough capacity for almost a free school. But we don't know about this. I didn't know about one of these programs until tonight for the first time, that you think you need 5 classrooms for that spread across the district. It's the first time this is coming up, and this is our 3rd meeting on Holland Hill.
That I remember.
Yeah. 4th? Something. So,
thank you.
I think you just need to, and I appreciate you saying you wanted to spend some time on this, but I think at the end of the process that you have this summer, I think we should have a townwide meeting about how we're going to use our schools, what their capacities are.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Anybody else? Seeing none, I'm going to call this item for a vote, and I am going to read it one last time. To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Holland Hills School Building Committee. Resolved that the bond appropriation entitled a resolution appropriating $17,300,500 for the costs associated with the improvement and renovation of Holland Hill Elementary School and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation be and hereby is approved. All in favor of this item? Opposed? Abstention? The item carries. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it. Good luck with your project. All right, I'm going to take a 5-minute recess, and we'll call everybody back. Thank you.
We still have
Mr. Bartley, you might as well come on up.
Stand by.
All right, I'm going to call us back into order, and we're going to address the last item of the evening on the agenda. I do have a couple notifications after this item. To hear, consider, and act upon a request from Public Works Director to transfer $289,000, $289,146 from the general fund contingency to the Department of Public Works fees and professional services, per the attached schedule, for the removal of hazardous material from the aggregated pile at the DPW yard at 1 Richard White Way. Do I have, I know, right? Mr. Brown, do I have a second? I'll take Mr. Mottola on the second. The item is now before us. Welcome.
Thank you. I'll just step you back. As you know, in November, December of 2016, contaminants were found on our Public Works aggregate pile. There's a certain area there which we've showed at past meetings. Approximately 100 by 100 within that square has to be remediated. To develop this bid specification you see included here, or the results of the bid specification, in February we did some deep pit testing, and that was not just to determine the extent or the levels of the PCBs there, but also to determine approximate width, length, and a depth on it so we could capture how much soil was there. And that was done under the guidance of a licensed environmental professional, an LEP, Logical Environmental Use, and also Brian Carey, who has quite a bit of expertise in this area. So he was, as you see, he's the one who penned this memo to you. He was instrumental in getting this going. So as part of the, as a result of those test pits that were done, a remediation bid was prepared in conjunction with our LEP, Licensed Environmental Protection Professional. It was advertised for public bid in April. Results were received, and we think they were somewhat favorable for the actual remediation work, approximately just over $190,000. So what we did with those results, the bid results, which is the contractor's results, there's also some oversight by the LEP, some laboratory testing that goes along with it, and we added a 20% contingency for variations in the actual quantities. So that leads to the request of $289,000 change, which you have before you tonight.
Thank you. I'll go to the board for questions. Mr. Michelangelo and Mr. Tetro. So there's two parts of this, right? Number one, we have to remediate this and get rid of this. Is there a time frame with which we have to do this by?
We do not have an order from the Connecticut DEP.
We do not.
We do not, but once again, we've been working in conjunction with them. They're aware of our schedule, so every milestone, once again, it's 6 months since we've discovered it, but once again, to do the testing takes time, to develop the bid takes time, to obtain the funding takes time. So they expect us to do this fairly quickly, so hopefully we'll get this approval so we could proceed as they want us to.
Okay, so we're in the midst of, for lack of a better word, discussions or confrontation with Julian, correct?
I think it's litigation, actually.
It's litigation.
Correct.
Is our hope that we get this reimbursed from them?
Yes.
That would be Mr. Tetra. So the goal is to get this reimbursed from them?
Correct.
Okay. And do we have time frame? How speedy is that litigation moving on? Are we 10 years out?
Could be tomorrow, could be 10 years from now. That's the way litigation works.
Okay.
Thanks. That was real helpful.
I was definitive.
Let's see whether he's any more definitive.
Let's ask another lawyer.
The issue is we're moving as fast as we can on that.
Mhm.
We've hired legal counsel and they're proceeding forward, and we discussed that a bit at the
Yeah, I know,
last
I
Board of
know.
Finance meeting.
Yep.
But other than saying we're moving as fast as we can, I don't have any estimate on the time.
Okay. Mrs. Marmion had her hand up, so I'll go to her first. I think she did.
Yeah, just a comment. I think we have to do this because we don't want to have our hand forced. We need to remediate, so I say move forward.
Mr. Brown?
If I remember right from our quarterly meeting when we discussed this, it was stated that if we didn't get this done, there could be fines to the town from the state. Do I remember that right? I didn't see the minutes.
Correct.
Okay, so that's
And
why
I
we...
think, again, I think Mr. Carey addressed that specifically. I think that...
Right.
But
Correct.
he's been in discussion with the, I'm going to say DEEP. There's several different divisions of DEEP, so we've talked to a couple different ones as we've gone through. And we'd initially told them back in December, as soon as we found out about this, we called them, we had them on site. You've heard that repeated before. They've kind of said initially, work with your LAP and take care of it. Now they're getting a little more interested in what's taking place and how soon we're going to get it done. So then
Do we know why they're getting more interested?
No.
Okay.
I would have thought they would have been more interested back in January when we first
Right.
we called them. I expected them to come in and take the site over and tell us exactly what to do, and we would, they didn't seem to do that. For some reason now they're getting more active on this. I don't understand why. However, we have kept them up to date as to what we're doing, which is what we promised to do. And at this point, they haven't issued a notice of violation, but that's always in their back pocket to do.
Okay. Mr. Brown, anything else? Mrs. Leclerc?
Yeah. Because we do have litigation involved, is it harmful if we clean it up in advance? I mean, wouldn't it be better to leave it as is?
No.
Okay. But you said we don't have a required time frame to clean this up. So isn't it,
What I said was that DEEP has gotten very interested again. There have been a number of phone calls and conversations between Mr. Carey and the appropriate party there. And we have basically asked them to hold up on any notice of violation since we're proceeding to do what they would tell us to do with a notice of violation.
have
DEEP will
they,
not let us go on and not clean this up.
okay, have they required us to submit some type of cleanup plan yet? Or,
They will. They're asking for our LEP, that's our licensed environmental professional, who basically acts as their agent to make sure things are done properly.
but, I don't know, I just remember hearing like different contaminations around the state, and sometimes it takes 10, 20 years before people actually get around to cleaning them up. So why are we so eager to clean it up? Is it a health risk? Is it,
Let's start with the basic, that our
Okay.
town has some contaminated soil on it. It's our property, and we want to clean it up.
okay,
Right, the sooner we clean it up, the less likely anything else can happen from there. So that's one. Two, DEEP is aware of this, and because of the nature of the PCBs and the type of contamination, they're going to want it cleaned up. And because they can hold us accountable.
okay. But isn't that what we're doing, what you're here, but if they're not requiring us yet, so why are we so eager to do it so quickly?
Because they will probably issue a notice of violation next week if we don't proceed with this.
Okay. But in a, I don't know, I just think if it's like in a lawsuit, isn't it better for us to say we need the funds, that's why we're pursuing the lawsuit?
The answer, short answer is no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Walsh, did you have something?
The question's kind of about liability. It's not about whether we need the funds. It's whether, who's liable and who's responsible. I think that's the case. And I just want to be clear. From what I'm hearing from you, and I heard from Brian Carey the last time, was that if we don't do something, we're going to get a notice of violation, correct?
That is my expectation.
Yes.
All right, I haven't been directly talking to DEEP. Brian has been.
Yeah.
But that is how he related to me.
Yes.
That he basically asked them to wait, let us proceed, don't give us a notice of violation, because from our standpoint, if we don't have the notice of violation, it gives us a little bit more flexibility in how we proceed.
Mhm.
Once we get the notice of violation, there are stricter enforcement guidelines.
Yep.
As I understand it. I haven't had a notice of violation before, so I can't tell you what the last one was like.
I mean, my own personal thought is, and I don't know whether it differs from the way town is, I'm concerned, I just want this thing cleaned up. And I actually like the fact that we're controlling it, and we're picking who the contractors are, and we can monitor where it's being sent to, and everything's being followed correctly. Overall, it's not a $10 million cleanup. It's a much smaller cleanup, thank goodness. But it just seems to me, it's like, if something happened in my own backyard, and I was in a fight with somebody about some contractor who I thought dumped oil while he was doing a construction project. Am I going to sit here and wait and fight with him all the way through court? Am I going to get my backyard cleaned up? I'm also concerned about liability from a child who just randomly gets down to that area and just doesn't know and starts walking around through there. And also now we have a personal liability suit against us. The thought is, we know the problem. I think we know that DEEP seems to be on it and wants to see what's the cleanup happen. I don't think we can wait and sit here for 5 years, 2 years, 1 year, whatever it is, to figure out, wait till the end of the litigation. Even if that was the case, the lawsuit's only going to determine one thing: who reimburses who for that. If we were ever, which I don't think we're going to be, held liable for that, or it was our responsibility, we've taken care of the problem without escalation costs. If we're not, we just get reimbursed on it. But either way, it's got to be cleaned up, and I think the sooner we do it, the better.
Thank you. Who's going to manage this from the town side?
Brian Carey has the expertise, so him, in conjunction with the LEP, will oversee all the work.
Okay. But we have someone from the town who's going to specifically make sure that the contractor does what they're supposed to do.
Correct. Brian has the expertise, and he'll take the lead on that.
So Brian will be the guy who's going to monitor and make sure that this is cleaned up from the town side.
Correct. And once again, the LEP has the license. Brian doesn't have the license, but the LEP is working for us, but Brian will be the town employee overseeing her.
Julianne was working for us, too. I want to make sure there's somebody on our payroll who's overseeing this.
Yes, Brian.
One of the points there is the LEP, and we used LEPs at the Metro Center when we were going through that cleanup.
Yep.
The LEPs, by definition, have a kind of a legal responsibility in terms of what they're doing, acting as an agent from DEEP to make sure that we're following the proper steps on that. So it's more than just having a contract manager that you hire to do it.
Mhm.
They actually have a more of an obligation to DEEP and the rules on that.
I
But-
think that's all
So
wonderful.
I just
Yeah.
want to explain, not only Brian, but there's also a different layer of legal responsibility and management that also goes along with this.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Look, I'm frustrated as hell by this whole situation, as I know others are. And I just want to know that we've got our person on the ground. I mean, we don't have two nickels to rub together from what's going on at the state right now. And we've got to drop $300,000 on this now in the hopes that we get it back later through the litigation that's going on. And it's poor timing for it. I just want to make sure that we monitor this effectively. That's it?
Yes.
We all do, and that will be done.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Mr. Brown?
See, we have a bid bond, which is good. When we talked on the quarterly meeting, I believe you were going to review every bid bond that we had to make sure they were up to date.
Were they bid bonds or performance bonds? I thought they were performance bonds we were going to have
This
to take
says
a look
bid
at.
bond, so.
This is just a bid bond.
In
So we were
terms
go-
of, in terms of our other projects, purchasing has gone through and done that.
I'm sorry?
In terms of our other projects, purchasing has gone through and done that.
Okay.
If that was your question, I thought you
Yes.
said about other projects.
And is that being done for this as well?
Oh, very definitely for this. Yeah, I mean, we haven't awarded it yet because we don't
I
have
understand.
approval, so it hasn't been done. So there's that, plus there's another step that risk management is taking a look at the amount to make sure that it's the correct amount.
Thank you.
Mr. Walsh is right, it was the performance
Yeah,
bond.
so this is not the performance bond.
Correct.
This is just their bond. It's just a bid bond so that they bid, this company's covering 5% of the cost of whatever their bid was in case they chose after they were awarded not to do it.
Yeah.
Right? That's what I thought this was.
Yeah, I
You'll
wasn't-
separately get a performance bond, I presume, correct?
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure of Mr. Brown's question. I thought he
Okay.
was asking about other projects at the time.
Right, that's what I was asking.
You were asking about all of them.
Right.
Yeah, I think
We were going to review all those bonds. Okay, and we've done that, purchasing.
Oh,
done
yes,
that.
we did that.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Yeah, my only other question is, separately from the area that you found the contamination, this, say, 100 by 100 area, we also have the big pile that has gotten much bigger than it was, seems to, supposed to have when it was supposed to be being reduced. As we go about, are we going to be taking on that work as well? Like moving forward on reducing the size of that, or were we going to wait on the lawsuit to figure out how we're going to deal with that?
Yeah, one of the ways that we'd reduce that initially would be looking at building a berm kind of around the site.
Yes.
So to the extent that we can use parts of this pile to do that, that would both help with the reduction and solve the berm issue at that time.
As we do that, are we going to be going and testing the soil as we start using that to make sure there's no further PCBs as we lower that pile, so that
Correct.
we don't find them on the property 20 years from now?
Correct.
We are. So as we take stuff off, we're taking samples, sending them off for analysis and things like that.
Correct, yeah, we won't be able, yes, we'll test before we use it. Were we to use it in some other place in town, or use it right there on site, or dispose of it some other way, we'd have to test it first to make sure that it's...
Make sure there wasn't any other contamination.
Correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure of that. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, anybody from the public have anything? Okay. The item is before us to hear, consider, and act upon a request from Public Works Director to transfer $289,146 from the general fund contingency to the Department of Public Works fees and professional services, per the attached schedule for the removal of hazardous material from the aggregate pile at the DPW yard at 1 Richard White Way. All in favor of this item? Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Thank you,
Good.
gentlemen. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
staying late
Thank you.
tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Tetra, can you hang for just a couple minutes while we go through?
Can I ask a question
Two
before we end
things?
the meeting?
Yeah, I've got two things I need to do first.
Okay.
All right.
These guys can't leave because it involves that.
Okay, so go ahead. Ask your question.
My question is, I thought we were getting an update tonight from in regards to the energy savings, in regards to all these solar stuff. We were going to have,
Yeah, we had a scheduling conflict.
That would be Mr. Bowman?
Yeah. We had a scheduling conflict, and he couldn't be here, and we've rescheduled him to the next quarterly meeting.
the next quarterly meeting being like September.
Yeah.
It's kind of far out.
It's a bit far out. But
Yeah.
We did have there was an issue with scheduling.
Yeah. If
I would
I
hope
might,
that- yep.
as an interim measure, if it would help bridge the gap, for lack of a better term, Mr. Bowman gave a presentation to the Board of Selectmen on just that. So two thoughts. One is that if you chose, you could watch that as a delivery, but we also possibly we get you the PowerPoint that he used. That
Yeah,
might-
that'd be great.
I think it's somewhat self-explanatory. There might be some pieces missing, but that might help with the discussion.
When was that meeting?
Just I want to say a few weeks ago.
Mr. Mayor, can you
In May, I
follow
think.
up on, hang on just a second, Mr. Tetra, please. Can you follow up and both get us that meeting date as well as a copy of that PowerPoint, if you wouldn't mind? Thank you, good idea.
I prefer if that doesn't go further past that meeting, because we're supposed to have it actually before this meeting, so.
Yeah, I don't know what
pursuant to
happened with
our-
that one.
Pursuant to our request, so.
Yeah, I think-
Now this is our second really delayed meeting on this. Now we're going to wait another 4 months for it, so.
The information was passed on, and I can't speak to why
Yeah, it was supposed to be in the last
changed,
quarterly.
Yeah. Mr. Bowman's just on
but,
vacation this week, is why he can't do it.
But basically,
You
as
make
of-
sure,
as
Mike,
of-
that you lock him
as
down
of
for that
right
meeting.
now, he's been locked down.
He's been locked
I want
down.
him locked
Mr. Mayor
down.
took care of it.
Thanks.
All right, scheduling items. The chairperson of the, chairman of the Board of Education, Mr. Dwyer, reached out to me. They're about to start contract negotiations with the teachers. And they have this law or requirement that they meet jointly with our board and have a discussion over what's going to happen during those negotiations, what our thoughts are on that negotiation. I believe, but I'm not 100% sure, that that might be a private executive session. I don't recall. But Mr. Dwyer has floated a bunch of dates to me throughout the month of July as recommendations. So, Mr. Mayor, you have those dates as well. If we could forward them tomorrow to the board
This is a full board?
and get kind of a sense. Yeah, we've done it in the past. Yeah, and as I recall, it's been private executive. And we go in and we sit around a bigger table and we just basically say, here's our priorities, here's what we think. And we also have the opportunity to have a representative from our board as party to those discussions, to those negotiations afterward the fact. So he did reach out to me, supplied a number of dates. I want to forward them to you, and then we'll try to coordinate the dates that work the best for the most people, okay? We do not have a July and August meeting, where we've canceled them routinely over the last several years, because the RTM typically doesn't meet during those timeframes either, and it's relatively the slower months of the year, and we pick up with 4 meetings, or rather 3 meetings in September, as well as an audit subcommittee meeting. Mr. DeWitt, did you have?
I was just going to ask a clarifying question. So is that a special meeting for the Board of Finance?
Yes, to meet
So-
with the Board of Education.
Could we also at that time take up any other business?
No,
No,
we're meeting-
just, that's the only agenda item.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
and it's executive session.
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe
Okay.
it is, as I recall, but I want to check, yeah.
Okay.
It makes sense that it would be, because we're talking about labor issues and things of that sort.
Is there a way with that representative, are we required to have a representative on there?
We are not, we are requested that we can. and we
Because it's
typically
kind of a
have.
weird position, because I thought the last time we did this, that representative was allowed to be a representative, but was not allowed to tell this board a thing that happened in that meeting.
Until the end.
Correct, that's normal negotiation protocol.
The question is can we put a representative on, and as a board, give that person marching orders by taking a vote, whether, what we would like to happen in those, what our stance would like to be by our representative in that.
Well, they don't get a vote on that, right? David did it
No, I
last
mean,
time for us.
And, yeah, I mean, I was the representative for both the negotiations last time, and that joint meeting sort of, I tried to take the marching orders of the board
Right.
into that, and while I think you're correct, technically I don't have a vote within the committee, there was.
You said they
without
used
diving
you
in,
and treated you pretty
They
well.
treated me, yeah,
Yeah.
they treated me very well, and I think I was. It was-
Additive to the process.
Yeah, I think that there was a goal to have a consensus on things and to try to take forward as best as you can. Not like every single thing on our wish list is ever going to come out of anything, but I did feel that it was a good.
Yeah, were you responsible for the 3.4% tax increase in their
There
salaries,
are people
David?
who have reminded me of that repeatedly ever
Yeah.
since, so.
Yeah,
Nice.
that's.
All right.
I think we need a new representative.
So I think it's,
My wife
I
would
think
like
we're
that
going to
very
sweeten the
much if I
pot and
wasn't
put
on
Mr.
there.
Walsh on
I've
this.
been warned already.
One other item,
Not voluntary.
one other item I wanted to just bring everybody up to speed about is that I've had a couple of meetings with Mr. Tetro, First Selectman Tetro. We've had a couple of meetings with First Selectman Tetro, or I have, relative to steps that are being put in place to proactively plan for issues with the state, both in the current fiscal year or in the coming fiscal year, as well as for the budget process. We also reached out to the superintendent and had a nice discussion with her related to her working with her board. What we're trying to do is get the town bodies to be proactive prior to the budget process, so we're not sitting here at the budget table making multi-million-dollar decisions with people crying about this program and that program and this and that, but really trying to do it together collectively. And what I've said to Mr. Tetro is that this board stands ready, willing, and able to assist in that process as we move forward and be proactive in that process throughout the course of the fall prior to the budget process. And as part of that, we spoke about, and it was Mrs. Leclerc's idea, this September meeting. And spending a bit less time on the capital plan, certainly reviewing that, but speaking about what steps are the town and the Board of Education and the Education Administration making towards reviewing all the procedures, processes, and everything internally. Mr. Tetro, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything, but I wanted you here for my comments on this, as I just updated my board.
No, thank you. I think that was a pretty accurate description of the conversations we've had.
So, happy to answer any questions on that. Obviously, we're going to get as many people involved as possible as we move forward, but we want to work collectively to make the right decisions moving forward. Anybody have anything?
Yeah, based on the new legislation just got passed last week regarding supplemental tax bills,
think
the
that still
ability
has
of
to go
towns
to-
to do that. It still has to go to the Senate?
I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I wasn't
that's
sure
my
whether that passed.
understanding as well.
All right.
And, I'm sorry, but I didn't mean to cut you off.
Under the current bill that's there, I have not had a chance, the legislation that was passed by the House, who do they give that responsibility to make that decision?
Oh, as the synopsis I read, actually yesterday or today from CCM, it says that it would go through, the ability to go through the normal budget approval process. So I assume Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, RTM.
Which, isn't that different than what we had originally thought, where it was going to be something that would go through the Board of Selectmen alone?
Two different concepts.
Okay.
We have the ability to do what's called an additional rate bill or supplemental tax bill. That would go through just the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
However, what this is literally a chance to open up the budget process.
Got it.
What the
Nice.
additional tax bill for the Board of Selectmen would literally just be creating more revenue. Budget would stay the same. This lets you redo the budget.
Nice.
Right now, we couldn't touch the Board of Ed and some other count. This would let us go back and do that and increase or decrease the mill rate. It's subject to, we couldn't increase it or decrease it more than the adjustment in state aid.
Got it.
I think in our case, we're safe. That'll be a big number.
That probably won't be a problem.
But as that's my understanding. So it's literally, it's reopening up the budget process. Any of the things that are locked in are not locked
Yeah,
in.
it reads a little
And
differently.
we can change the additional payments to whatever they have to be to make up, were we to increase the mill rate, we could change the additional payments in the balance of the tax payments.
Right. Going forward.
Yes.
So we could change the contingency amount and put monies directly into accounts and stuff like that.
Correct.
Excellent. Great news.
Mr. Becker?
And I don't know if maybe it sort of falls under
Real
this
quick.
a little bit loosely, but where are we with, as we approach the year end, in regards to
Thank you, David. I
some of
forgot this.
some? Oh no, that's fine. Certainly, some of the things that we talked about from how things were done last year, and I know how the Board of Ed had discussed, and I think we had sort of liked the idea of perhaps some of those one year to the other adjustments to sort of balance things out like we did last year, and possibly departments being able to, versus rolling a surplus into the, into the general fund, maybe being able to spend down some of the money, but then locking them down earlier in the year, knowing that there's kind of a cut coming. Is that occurring? How are we sort of getting the department heads to be able to sort of manage what the coming storm, but prepare for it, and then make sure that everything sort of matches up between the 2 years with what we know is going to be more reductions?
Step
like
one
last
is we
year.
had to wait to kind of get a better estimate in terms of where we'd finish this year. Certainly what's happened with the contingency tonight impacts that, and I'll be sitting down with Mr. Mayor to discuss that. The focus of the department heads really at this point is on twofold. One is I have them going out and talking to other towns and searching out best practices to see what we can do better here. And that's due back to me from that standpoint. The other piece, and I'm meeting with the department heads tomorrow morning to explain that starting July 1st, we will not spend a penny that's not legally required. No capital purchases, nothing we are not required to do until we have a budget from the state and we know where we are.
Does that mean that we won't be having a library? Because the library is not required by the state. Parks and Rec, too.
No, legally, those things we have in place. No, it doesn't mean anything that dramatic, Jim. I'm
Okay.
basically
No, I
saying
mean, we
that
talked
here's
about it.
the deal. Mr. Bartlett left. I told him he's not spending any money on paving until we have a deal with the state.
Are we spending money on, say, the library purchases of books?
No.
No. Okay, so no.
No capital expenditures, that type of thing.
You'd
And
consider that
anything
to
we're
be
buying, the guideline is, literally a 1-month supply. My meeting tomorrow morning will be basically to reiterate that, and then basically remind them that I don't want to do anything stupid. So if that guideline doesn't fit, that they should come to me right away. And I'll use an example from the private sector. I worked for a company one time where we were under some fiscal constraints, and they said, "Thou shalt buy no furniture." Now, we were expanding, my small little group was expanding, and we were told we shouldn't buy any office furniture. We were told we had to lease it. The lease costs more than the purchase.
That becomes a problem.
Yeah,
I mean,
so it's
because
like, I just wanna
Mr.
make
Bartlett
sure that-
talking about the street sweeper.
Yep.
We can release it for the summer for $50,000, but a new one's only, 200.
Yeah. So we're going to take a look and make sure that that guideline is applied appropriately, and if there's anything they see, because they know their little nooks and crannies of the budget, if that would in fact cause the town to do something fiscally unwise, that it get back to us right away and do that. There's always some unrecognized collateral damage you do when you come up with a broad guideline, but we're trying to make sure that we are appropriately cautious in terms of looking at what the state may or may not do until we get an answer, and then assuming it might be September, October, not assuming it's going to be anything quick, hoping it's by September, October, I guess maybe is a way to say that.
Yeah, no kidding.
But we want to make sure that and in the same way that we'll, use overtime cautiously, I think that we appropriately manage overtime now, but if there were some projects we were going to do that we might normally do on overtime to get them done sooner or something, we're going to review those carefully to make sure that's a reasonable use of overtime as opposed to just waiting on the project.
Let's, we didn't agenda this item, so I want to be very careful. Mr. Becker, you have one other thought. Thank you, Mr. Tetra.
Yeah, and I don't have to make it a question. I mean, just from a statement standpoint, I think one of the things is we understand that the revenue surplus items have to go into the general fund or very limited accounts, but from an expense side, I think we just want to make sure that that's not going to the general fund, perhaps, similar to last year. So either open it up and let them spend it on some of the items now versus on the July 1, and to give you breathing room into the next year, or like what we did last year, pave the way for other accounts like the debt service line, things like that, because they worked well last year to really help us versus tucking it away into that account and then not having that access essentially permanently based upon what we've talked about with touching it.
Yeah, if you think back to the quarterly meeting, there are a number of items we identified as being on hold, and we've kept you updated on that throughout the year. We will both review those as to whether, if we have appropriate monies, it's appropriate to release those funds and spend them, or if perchance, given new priorities, we should spend that money differently. But you're right, we'll look at the expenses that we've already been authorized to spend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Seeing none, I'm going to call for a motion to adjourn. Anybody? Mrs. Murray, do I have a second? Thank Mr. Walsh. All in favor of adjournment? Opposed? Abstentions? Thanks, everybody. We'll be in touch about that meeting.